Chapter 45-43. She had never told him about it. What? Was she afraid that he would feel guilty if he found out? Perhaps she did not want this matter to bind Gong Jia for the rest of his life. If it were another woman, she might have told Gong Jia about this matter to make him feel guilty. This way her love would become righteous. Then, what if it was him? If he had sacrificed so much for someone, would he really remain silent? So far, the only person who could make him sacrifice without any complaints was Yun Shirshir. He had not dared to think that he would remove his cornea for Yun Shirshir. He had not dared to think about it before. He even thought that he would not do it. But now that things had developed to that point, he did it almost without any hesitation. Then, if the same thing happened again and the other party was Gong Jia, would he still do it? To be honest, he did not know if he could do what Alice did. Alice's love for Gong Jia was too heavy and too great. For Gong Jia, she personally brought people and came to East Africa to look for him regardless of the consequences. She loved Gong Jia so much. Why did she not confess to him? If Gong Jia knew about this, what would he think? Hua Jin was deep in thought when he heard Alice say, "You're still thinking about a birthday present at this juncture?" He came back to his senses and looked at Alice. However, he saw Alice looking at Gong Jia with a look of disdain. "It's my birthday tomorrow. I'll have to trouble you. I'll celebrate it with you when we get back to the island." I want to celebrate it." Gong Jia even sighed. "Originally, I wanted to rush back to celebrate my birthday with my sister." He was born on the same day as Yun Shirshir. His biggest wish was to celebrate his birthday with Yun Shirshir every year. He was afraid that he could not do it this year. Gong Jia could not help but feel a little regretful. "I'll go outside and check if there are any FBI soldiers in the hospital." As Alice spoke, she stood up, looked around and said to Hua Jin, "You stay in the ward obediently, do you hear me?" "I heard you." Alice walked out with her men. Hua Jin stared at Gong Jia's back. For a moment he was in a daze. He was hesitating whether or not he should tell him about it. It wasn't that he was being nosy. Instead, he had the right to know who had risked their lives to save him back then. It was not that he wanted to fight for something for Alice. Instead, it was a personal sacrifice. Although it was not for the sake of getting what he wanted, at the very least, he wanted to let Gong Jia know that he had paid such a huge price. This was the right of Gong Jia. It was also Alice's duty. Similarly, there was one more thing he wanted to confirm. Hua Jin suddenly plucked up his courage, walked in front of Gong Jia and sat down opposite him. Gong Jia's knuckles, which were holding the teacup, stiffened. He looked at him in a daze. He had a feeling that he had something important to say to him. "What's the matter?" "I think that Alice is actually quite good." Gong Jia was speechless. This sentence, which came out of nowhere, did indeed stun him. "Yes, I know that she's quite good. What about you? How do you feel about her?" Hua Jin asked again. Gong Jia's lips twitched. "What do you mean by how do I feel about her? You've always treated her as a good friend?" Gong Jia pondered for a moment and then said seriously, "Rather than calling her a friend, it's better to call her a comrade." "Comrade? Revolutionary friendship?" Chapter 45-44. Hua Jin sat down opposite him. "I think that Alice is quite good." Gong Jia looked at him suspiciously. He didn't understand why he was suddenly telling him this. Hua Jin continued, "Alice may sound mean, but she has a sharp tongue but a soft heart." Gong Jia tapped the table lightly with his fingers. "Do you have something to say?" Hua Jin licked his lips. "I have a feeling that you have something to say but you're hesitating." "It's like this." Hua Jin took a deep breath and said, "I think that you owe her a thank you." Gong Jia was stunned. "Do you know why Alice is infertile?" Gong Jia suddenly stood up when he heard this. He grabbed his collar and frowned slightly. "You know?" He had always wondered why Alice would lose her ability to conceive for no reason. However, no matter how he asked Alice, Alice refused to answer. Gong Jia had also secretly investigated this matter. However, there was nothing fishy about Alice's infertility. If Alice was said to be a woman whose private life was more chaotic, then perhaps because she was too indulgent and had too many abortions, or perhaps because she hurt her body because of her promiscuity, then it would be a different story. Although Alice was very good at talking, in fact, her love and private life could be said to be a blank slate. It was impossible to say that she was infertile from birth. But, as for the reason behind it, she had never mentioned it to her brother. Hua Jin knew the reason. Gong Jia couldn't help but feel agitated. He had always been troubled by Alice's infertility. Hua Jin saw that he was so nervous and asked, "Are you very concerned about her?" "Of course." Gong Jia became anxious and asked, "Don't you know?" "Tell me." "Because," Hua Jin gulped and asked again, Do you remember that you were infected with the plague when you carried out a mission? Didn't you get infected with the virus? Gong Jie said, yes. Hua Jin said, at that time in order to save you she used her own body as an experimental specimen. She planted the vaccine in her body? To be honest, I don't really understand this issue. However, I heard that he first implanted the virus into his own body and then experimented with the vaccine on her body. Fortunately, the experiment was very successful. However, because of the infection with the vaccine, the virus destroyed many of her body's skills and she also lost her ability to reproduce. Although she won't completely lose her fertility, if she takes the risk of getting pregnant, there's a 99% chance that the fetus will be deformed. Gong Jie listened silently, and his eyes became darker and darker. She did that? She actually did this for him? No wonder. Back then, when he was infected with the virus, a vaccine for the plague that swept the entire impoverished country was immediately available. He only knew that Alice was one of the main researchers for this vaccine. However, he didn't know that she was the one who took the initiative and used her own body as an experiment. After the vaccine was developed, it had to be tested before it could be used. And Alice was willing to use her own body as an experiment for him. Gong Jie immediately let go of Hua Jin's collar and supported himself on the table, somewhat unable to accept this fact. Chapter 45-45. I wanted to say it too, but Gong Jie turned to look at her. She didn't want you to say it? This stupid woman. Gong Jie punched the table angrily. Who asked her to do this? She did it to save you. She didn't know that she would lose her fertility because of this experiment. After a pause, Hua Jin continued, but I think that if she were to go back and make a choice again, even though she knew that she would lose her fertility, I think she would still do it. Because Gong Jie's lips curled into a smile. She likes me. You knew? If I didn't know, I wouldn't be Gong Jie. It was just that he had always pretended not to know. He had tried to make it clear, but Alice didn't confess her feelings. He didn't have the right to say that. He even felt that he had gone overboard. Alice didn't express her feelings, but he still had to reject her cruelly. Alice didn't say anything, but she probably knew that he didn't have any feelings for her. In fact, both Alice and Gong Jie were very smart. Smart people could see through each other's feelings from their words and actions. If two people liked each other but didn't confess their feelings, then they must be idiots. But two people who admired each other were probably like magnets. They didn't dare to be separated by anything. Their admiration for each other would bring them closer and closer to each other. And two people who didn't love each other, even if one of them was wishful thinking, the other would only step back and drift further and further away. Hence, Alice could tell that Gong Jie didn't like her. He had already made it very clear. How could she not know what was good for her? Hence, she didn't tell Gong Jie about this because she didn't want this to become a burden for him. Alice had always thought that if Gong Jie was destined to not be her life partner, then she would be his family. She could always protect him. Anyway, love would eventually turn into family. She didn't want to hold him back. When she found out that Gong Jie liked Hua Jin, she was really gloating. This was her little selfishness. If the man she liked didn't like her because he liked other men, then she still had a chance to comfort herself. Gong Jie sat down at the table with a serious expression. She didn't tell me because she didn't want me to be grateful to her. Yes. Hua Jin rested his chin on his hand. She doesn't want you to know, but I feel that she has the responsibility to tell you, and you have the right to know, don't you think? Thank you. After learning the truth from him, Gong Jie finally breathed a sigh of relief. When Alice finished patrolling the corridor outside the ward and returned to the room, she saw only Gong Jie in the room. She was surprised. Where is he? Where did he go? Gong Jie raised his head and looked at her deeply. Come here. Ah. Alice walked over with some hesitation. The corners of her lips twitched. Especially when she saw Gong Jie's serious expression, she felt even more uncomfortable. Ew. What's wrong? Gong Jie stood up and came close to her. Let me ask you, is it because of me that you lost your ability to conceive? When Alice heard this, she froze on the spot as if she had been struck by lightning. I know everything. If Hua Jin didn't tell me about this, how long did you intend to keep it from me? Chapter 45-46. Alice didn't sound angry. Instead, she sounded powerless and helpless. She had been betrayed by Hua Jin despite trying so hard. She really didn't want Gong Jie to know about this matter. After all, this was a one-sided decision that she had made. Gong Jie wasn't responsible for it. Shouldn't I know the cause and effect of this matter? Gong Jie didn't think much of it. Why did you do that? I don't know. I just did it subconsciously. Alice said. At that time it was also a spur of the moment. So, I want to hear the truth. Because, Alice shrugged and said in a very relaxed tone, because I like you. I like you so much that as long as you're alive, I'm willing to pay any price. She was such a simple-minded person. Liking someone probably meant that she wanted him to be good. Actually, this wasn't selflessness. It was just purely, she wanted him to be good. That was all. Alice hurriedly said, I didn't mean to hide it from you. I just didn't want to burden you and make you feel guilty because of this matter. Gong Jie said angrily, do you think I'm worried about you? Or do you think I'll blame myself and feel guilty towards you because of this matter? You won't? Of course not. Alice actually heaved a sigh of relief. That's good then. It's not a big deal anyway. She was finally able to put down the huge rock in her heart. She was really relieved to hear that from her brother. Gong Jie looked at her relieved expression and for some reason, felt tears welling up in his eyes. Earlier on he had just said those words out of anger. However, he didn't expect that Alice's relieved expression would make him feel bad. Gong Jie took a deep breath and said, this kind of thing can't happen again. Okay. I also hope that there won't be a next time. Although it's not a big deal, it still took half of my life. Gong Jie finally couldn't hold it in anymore. His heart ached so much that he pulled Alice into his embrace. His throat was already slightly hoarse. You should have told me about this earlier. Alice noticed that his shoulders were trembling slightly, and she couldn't bear to see him like this. If I had known that Hua Jin's mouth wouldn't be reliable. Forget it. I had originally planned to keep this matter from you even if I were to die. But since you already know. Spilled water could not be retrieved. Alice rubbed the back of his head helplessly. Gong Jie, you still blame yourself for this, right? Gong Jie did not say anything. Alice asked again, do you know why I never told you? Gong Jie was still speechless. Because. Alice said faintly, I don't want you to treat me as your benefactor and feel grateful and guilty towards me. You should have told me. What's the point of telling you? Alice shrugged. Don't tell me that if I told you, my body would return to how it used to be? Or would I let you live the rest of your life with gratitude and guilt towards me? There's no need for that. It's not worth it. It's worth it. His lips curled into a smile. At the very least, I'll know who saved my life. Wow, after hearing that, shouldn't I be a little touched? But Alice finally couldn't help but say, is this the only time I saved you? Gong Jie was speechless. Previously, I saved you so many times, but you didn't seem to thank me much. Chapter 45-47. That's different. Alright, I got it. Alice sighed helplessly. If you really want to thank me, please try your best to make yourself happier. Gong Jie was stunned. Do you think I'm selfless? Alice snorted mischievously. Of course not. I just hope that you can be happier. At least you can live a peaceful life. Be happy with Hua Jin. Love life. Love life. At least don't let me down for saving your life time and time again. When Gong Jie heard this, he suddenly laughed helplessly. Finally, he let out a breath that was stuck in his throat. Yes, I will. That's good. Alice asked again, is there anything else? Gong Jie looked at her silently. Alice really couldn't stand his deep gaze. She felt awkward and inexplicably sad. She hurriedly said, if there's nothing else, I'm leaving. With that, she turned around and left the room as if she was fleeing. Until she was far away from the room and in the corridor, she leaned against the wall and heaved a sigh of relief. Unknowingly, her eyes turned red. If she could be more selfish, when Gong Jie questioned her about this matter, she would definitely take the opportunity to confess to him. She would say, Gong Jie, I like you. I love you. It's because I love you so much that I risked everything to save you, even if I had to sacrifice my fertility. Or rather, Gong Jie, since I sacrificed so much to save you, are you going to be responsible for me? She could totally use this matter to ask for a reward. However, she couldn't seem to do it. She couldn't open her mouth. As a doctor, she couldn't make any mistakes during surgery. Even the slightest mistake in the details could lead to unpredictable consequences. It was the same for love. If there was less love, it wouldn't be called love. If it was one-sided love, it wouldn't be called love. She might as well fulfill it. In fact, words like, I'd rather Gong Jie like a man than a woman, were all against her heart. They were just said for Hua Jin to hear. But in reality, she knew better than anyone that Gong Jie liked Hua Jin only because Hua Jin happened to be a man. He did not only like men. She couldn't possibly ask Gong Jie to reciprocate her love just because she had sacrificed so much. Being good to a person is voluntary. Similarly, loving a person is voluntary. However, Just now when she said, "I really love you," he almost said it out loud. Alice tightly covered her mouth. For the first time in her life, the urge to cry overcame her reason, and tears suddenly gushed out of her eyes. Hua Jin happened to pass by and vaguely saw Alice leaning against the wall, covering her mouth and biting her knuckles as if she was crying. He walked over worriedly, but when he got closer, he realized that Alice was really crying. What's wrong?" Hearing Hua Jin's voice, Alice raised her head and glared at him fiercely. She sobbed and said, "Hua Jin, you betrayed me." Why did you tell Gong Jia about that?" Alice said angrily. "Gong Jia knew about this and came looking for me. I was the one who told him." Hua Jin had a matter-of-fact look on his face. "I think he should know about this. He has the right to know. Why can't you tell him?" "Traitor." Alice was angry when she saw him. Chapter 45-48. Hua Jin said, "You can say whatever you want. Anyway, I think Gong Jia has the right to know about this." "What about you?" Alice suddenly became aggressive. "Do you like Gong Jia?" Hua Jin suddenly didn't know how to reply. He turned his face away awkwardly. "Why are you asking this question?" "Hua Jin, do you know that sometimes I really want to beat you up?" "You obviously like Gong Jia too, don't you?" Hua Jin immediately retorted, "When did I? If you don't like him, why did you take such a big risk and come all the way to East Africa to look for him? If you don't like him, why do you blush every time you see Gong Jia? If you don't like him, why can't you sleep well the whole night because you're worried? Who's here for him?" Hua Jin felt wronged. "I just want to experience what it's like to be a mercenary on a mission." Alice couldn't help but sneer. "So how long are you going to say one thing and mean another?" "How am I saying one thing and mean another?" "If you continue to say one thing and mean another, I'll really beat you up," Alice said angrily. "The one who's favored is indeed fearless. Have you ever considered my feelings? You clearly know that Gong Jia likes you and you like Gong Jia too. Why can't you just admit it? Is your reputation so precious? Gong Jia can put down his status as the young master of the Gong family to confess his feelings to you. Why don't you admit your feelings? Is it really that difficult for you to admit that you like Gong Jia?" With that, Alice curled her lips in self-mockery. "Do you know how envious I am of you? You have to know that it's not easy for two people to like each other. Most people, the person they like doesn't like them and the person they like doesn't like them. They always miss out on love. What about you? Don't wait until you really miss out on love and regret it. What about you?" Hua Jin said angrily, "Aren't you the same? Don't you like Gong Jia? Why didn't you say a word or tell him? Don't tell me you're just going to watch him pass by? Because he already knows everything. Whether I say it or not, the effect will be the same." Hua Jin said angrily, "How would you know if you don't try? What if he likes you a little? There's no need for that. It's different. Even if he knows about it, you didn't tell him about it in front of him. At least tell him about your feelings." Alice suddenly turned her head and looked at him with tears in her eyes. "You want me to confess in front of him and be rejected once? That's not what I meant. Or do you want me to beg for his mercy in front of him?" Hua Jin was at a loss for words. "I didn't." Alice almost exhausted all her strength. "It's not a big deal. As long as you work hard, it will be useful. If she didn't like him, she didn't like him. If she didn't love him, she didn't love him. Although no matter what, one had to try their best and struggle a little to know whether there was hope or not." Chu Yunxing was still in a daze. But this was the only thing that Alice didn't want to struggle with. Her greatest gentleness was not to disturb or force him. Chapter 45-49. Hua Jin looked at Alice in a daze and was silent for a long time. Alice asked, "Life is so short. Isn't it a blissful thing to be able to be with someone you like and who likes you back?" At the hospital, Yun Shirshir sat on the balcony. After drying the clothes, she leaned against the balcony in a daze. Mu Yaja walked over and hugged her waist from behind, gently resting his head on her shoulder. "What's wrong? What's on your mind?" "I'm thinking, when will the vaccine be available?" Mu Yaja couldn't help but laugh. "It's not like you're just thinking about it. The vaccine will be available for clinical use tomorrow. But I'm still praying silently in my heart." "Who are you praying to? Jesus? Or Buddha?" Mu Yaja paused and said, "As the saying goes, if you're sincere, it'll happen. If you're not sincere, how can God hear your prayers?" Mu Yaja gently stroked her hair. "All right, don't think so much. I'm worried just like you. But worrying is useless." Yun Shirshir was still absent-minded. Mu Yaja kissed her cheek and hugged her gently. "Tomorrow is your birthday." Yun Shirshir finally reacted. My birthday? You were so busy taking care of the little guys that you forgot about your birthday? Yun Shirshir said, how can I be in the mood to celebrate my birthday at this critical juncture? We still have to celebrate your birthday. We don't want to build our happiness on Xiao Yichen's suffering. Instead, we have to persevere in the face of adversity and hope for life. Mu Yaja continued, besides, your birthday is very meaningful. When the time comes, we'll bake a cake and send it to Xiao Yichen. Although he can't be by your side this year, we have to tell him that we hope that he can be there for your birthday next year, the year after that, and every year after that. Yes. Yun Shirshir nodded. Unknowingly, her face was wet with tears. After returning home from the hospital, because she had not been home for a long time, the whole house was filled with a sense of loneliness. He hadn't come back for a long time, so much so that there wasn't even the slightest trace of life left. Yun Shirshir hurriedly turned on the lights in all the rooms. The bright light finally brought a trace of vitality to the cold and cheerless home. After Mu Yaja parked the car, he walked into the house. Looking at the lights in the house, he finally felt a trace of warmth. Usually he had 3 points and 1 line. Hospital, company, home. Usually Yun Shirshir would be at the hospital. Usually when he came back from the company, he only used the bedroom. When Yun Shirshir was not at home, his 3 meals a day were basically settled in the company cafeteria. Both Lu Jinyu and Jiang Shen were a little surprised. Why had boss been going to the company cafeteria every day recently? Isn't sister-in-law cooking at home? Looking at Mu Yaja's depressed expression, could it be that the two of them had quarreled? That's impossible. They are clearly very loving and respectful to each other. They could vaguely tell that Mu Yaja had been preoccupied with a lot of things recently. He was a little absent-minded when it came to company matters. However, Mu Yaja didn't say anything to them. They didn't dare to ask too much. In front of Yun Shirshir, he was her husband. In front of Yu Yueyao and Xiao Yichen, he was a father. It was only in the company that he was a man of flesh and blood. Chapter 45-50. He was also afraid. Guilt seemed to be the last straw, and it was about to crush him. When he thought back to Xiao Yichen's childhood, he realized that he was not a good father. He did not care for others, nor did he love others. It was only after he got together with Yun Shirshir that he learned how to care for and love children. Thanks to Yueyao, he was finally promoted to a qualified stay-at-home father. As for Xiao Yichen's childhood, he could no longer make up for it. Xiao Yichen was very strong-willed. He was never willing to say anything, but it could be seen that Xiao Yichen was very envious of both Yu and Yueyao. It was the kind of envy that came from deep within his bones. However, he had always been so sensible. He was so sensible that it made one's heart ache. With such a pity, Mu Yaja was worried that he would never have the chance to make up for Xiao Yichen. At night, negative emotions came and went as one wished. He had not had a good night's sleep for a long time. Now that he was home, he finally felt a trace of the warmth of home. It more or less dispelled some of the loneliness in his heart. He sat on the sofa and looked in the direction of the living room. He listened to the sound of Yun Shirshir beating eggs and mixing flour. Yun Shirshir did not feel very uncomfortable about the cake. However, she had been practicing her baking skills with Yu. She had also improved a little after killing so many people. After a while, she finished mixing the dough and made a cake embryo. Then she put it into the oven. An hour later, the cake embryo was taken out. During this time, Yun Shirshir had already prepared the condensed milk, mousse, chocolate, Oreo cookies and other ingredients. She smoothed the condensed milk and mousse bit by bit. When the final cake was out of the oven, Yun Shirshir looked at the cake that was pretending to be perfect and called Mu Yaja over happily. Mu Yaja walked over and looked at the cake. He was very satisfied. Although my skills have deteriorated a little, it's still considered exquisite. I haven't made it in a long time. I'm indeed a little rusty. Yun Shirshir dipped the remaining mousse on her finger and brought it to Mu Yaja's mouth. Here, try it. Mu Yaja took a bite and licked it. He raised his eyebrows in satisfaction. The taste is not bad. Right? Yun Shirshir was very pleased. At least this proves that you haven't regressed too much. Where's the packaging? Here. The two of them sealed the cake in a box and put it in the fridge. At night he would not go to the hospital. Gu Jinglian and Chu Ho stayed behind to take care of her, while Yun Shirshir and Mu Yaja came back to rest for a while. The two families reached an agreement. Taking turns to keep watch at night, this way the pressure on the various families would lessen. Although people could rest in the hospital, they were provided with foldable single beds, which were not comfortable to sleep on. If they did not sleep well, it would affect their condition in all aspects. This was especially true during company meetings. There were several times when Mu Yaja dozed off in front of several employees. Lu Jinyu and Jiang Shen were dumbfounded. When they got home, they took a comfortable hot bath. The two of them hugged each other and lay on the bed, feeling extremely comfortable. After so many days of stressful life, they finally relaxed a little at this moment. Yun Shirshir lay on Muyaja's chest and asked worriedly, "Will Xiao Yichen really be safe?" Muyaja opened his eyes. Actually, he was not sure about this, but I believe that my son is blessed by the heavens. He will definitely be fine. Chapter 45-51. As she spoke, Yun Shirshir laughed self-deprecatingly. People only realize how precious that person is when they are on the verge of losing them. Thinking back, Xiao Yichen has always been very sensible. That day when he was critically ill, I was waiting outside the door and kept thinking about it. I feel like I owe him too much. In the future, there will be plenty of opportunities to make it up to him. I'm just afraid that there won't be any more opportunities. Don't say such things that destroy the morale of our own people. Muyaja paused for a moment and immediately comforted her. The vaccine has already been developed. Don't think too much. Don't let your imagination run wild. Go to bed early. Okay. Yun Shirshir closed her eyes and lay on his chest. It was rare for her to sleep so peacefully. The next day the sun was shining brightly. The gloomy weather for a few days finally came to an end. The sun was shining brightly and the weather was good. Yun Shirshir woke up and drew the curtains. Receiving such warm sunlight, the gloominess in her heart finally dissipated a little. Yun Shirshir woke up early in the morning and was busy in the kitchen. Besides the cake, she also had to prepare some dishes. Muyaja applied for leave and brought the cake to the hospital with Yun Shirshir. Gu Jinglian and Chu Ho were a little confused when they saw that they came with a cake. Whose birthday is it? Yu Yu immediately said, Mommy's birthday. I remember. Yueyao was also beaming with joy. The atmosphere in the hospital was always oppressive. It was rare that Yun Shirshir's birthday happened, so it seemed to add some joy. Since we're in the hospital this year, we won't hold a grand birthday party. Yun Shirshir placed the cake on the table and placed the dishes one by one on the table. Chu Ho was very happy. It would be even better if there was wine. Let's drink a few glasses. Muyaja raised his eyebrows. There is. He took out a bottle of champagne from his handbag and even brought a wine glass with him. Even if they were in the hospital, the ceremony of a birthday celebration could not be lacking. Yueyao lay on the table, drooling as she stared at the cake. Suddenly she asked, "Then, what about Xiao Yichen? Can he eat a birthday cake? Cut him a slice first and when we're done eating, send this slice of cake to the quarantine zone." Yueyao's eyelashes drooped in disappointment. Yun Shirshir immediately guessed what he was thinking. He squatted down and gently scratched her nose. "Yueyao, that won't do. If the cake is sent in, we can't eat it. The quarantine area is a sterile area. There are a lot of bacteria outside, so my brother can't come out to celebrate his birthday with us." Yueyao said, "Then I'll eat less and leave more for my brother." "Yueyao, be good. You don't have to keep it. The cake is very big. I can't eat too much now. Otherwise, I won't be able to do it if I vomit it out." If he vomited, the blood would flow back into the trachea, which could easily endanger his life. Therefore he had to rely on liquid food for now. He could only eat a little of the cake. A few mouthfuls would be bad enough. Yueyao nodded sensibly. "Then I'll wish Mommy a happy birthday on behalf of my brother." Yun Shirshir was so touched that she kissed her. Yu walked over and gave Yun Shirshir a big hug. "Mommy, happy birthday. I wish that you'll always be 18. Thank you, Yu. Yun Shirshir kissed Yu. Gu Jinglian and Chu Ho gave their blessings one by one. Because of this accident, the relationship between the two families became much better than before. Especially Muyaja and Gu Jinglian, who even knew how to tease each other. Chapter 45-52. Chu Ho inserted candles into the cake. The candles were shaped like numbers and Gu Jinglian drew the curtains in the ward. The moment he lit the candles, the faint light reflected on Yun Shirshir's face, and her gaze was gentle. Chu Ho said, "Shirshir, hurry up and make a wish." She had already thought of the wish countless times. Yun Shirshir closed her eyes, and a strong wish surfaced in her mind. She wished that Xiao Yichen would not miss her birthday again. This wish did not ask for much, but could it come true? Yun Shirshir made the wish sincerely and gently blew out the candles. Chu Ho passed the knife to her. Yun Shirshir cut a piece of cake and put it aside. This piece was for Xiao Yichen. She also cut another piece and put it together with Xiao Yichen. Chu Ho was a little surprised. "Who is this for? Have you forgotten? And your Xiao Bao? Not a single one of them can be missing." Chu Ho came back to his senses. "So you haven't forgotten about Xiao Bao?" He had originally thought that Yun Shishir had probably forgotten about Xiao Yichen because she had been thinking about Xiao Bao. Chu Ho had originally felt that it was a pity that Xiao Bao would not be able to eat the cake because he was also in the quarantine zone. He had not expected that Yun Shishir would still be thinking about him. This is for Xiao Yichen and Xiao Bao. Later, after we finish eating, we'll send the cake to them. Okay. We can't forget about them. After dividing the cake evenly, Yu took a portion for Yueyao and another for Jing Yang. The little guy was eating with relish. Although cake was not a rare thing and the little lads had been living in good conditions since they were young, they were sick of eating all kinds of cakes. However, in such an environment, staying in the hospital for so many years, they had to eat nutritious meals. It was rare to have cake in such a boring diet, so it was considered a novelty. Yu even felt that this cake was the best thing he had ever eaten in the world. Yu raised the cake and asked, "Mommy, did you make this cake?" "Yes." "Wow." Yu looked at her with admiration. "This cake is probably the best thing I've eaten since I came to this world." Yun Shishir, Mu Yaja could not help but say, "Is it? I feel that my cooking skills haven't changed. You've been eating nutritious meals in the hospital all this time. It's a rare occasion you get to eat cake, so you think it's delicious." Upon hearing this, Yu thought about it for a while. Then he complained to Yun Shishir, "Mommy, Daddy said that your cake tastes awful." Mu Yaja resisted the urge to hit him. "Did I say that? You're trying to drive a wedge between us." "That's right." Yu said eloquently, "I said that Mommy's cake is delicious, but Daddy said that I've been eating too much nutritious meals in the hospital and that's why I've lost my sense of taste." Yun Shishir looked at Mu Yaja meaningfully. Mu Yaja explained, "That's not what I meant. But it sounds like that to me." Chu Ho's tone was as if he wanted to see the world in chaos. Mu Yaja opened his mouth but could not say a word. Gu Jinglian also nodded seriously. "Don't explain. Any explanation is a cover-up." As Yueyao ate the cake, Musi's mouth was full, but he still nagged, "If Daddy doesn't like Mommy's cake, then Daddy shouldn't eat it." Chapter 45-53. Yueyao was not angry. Instead, she enjoyed Mu Yaja feeding her personally. Yu was amused by Yueyao. "Haha, it's best that Daddy doesn't eat. This way Yueyao can eat more, right?" Yueyao finished a piece of cake in the blink of an eye. Then, she turned to look at Mu Yaja and opened her mouth wide again. Everyone couldn't help but think of a baby bird waiting to be fed. They straightened their necks and opened their mouths wide, waiting for their mother to feed them. Mu Yaja patiently fed her a small piece of cake. "Delicious?" Yu Yao happily swayed her head from side to side as she ate the delicious cake. When everyone saw this, they couldn't help but smile. Gu Jinglian's eyes were fixed on her. Chu Ho saw him staring blankly and couldn't help but nudge him on the shoulder. "Why are you staring at someone else's daughter?" Mu Yaja was shocked when he heard this. He quickly shielded his precious Yueyao and looked at Gu Jinglian warily. "What are you doing?" Gu Jinglian was caught red-handed and turned his handsome face away awkwardly. Chu Ho laughed. "I think someone is envious. Envious of having a little princess." Yun Shishir was surprised. "Hey, didn't you have twins? Jinglian, where's your Qianqian?" At the mention of Qianqian, Gu Jinglian's usually arrogant face was filled with disappointment. Chu Ho laughed even harder when he heard this. "Qianqian is not close to him." "Not close?" Yun Shishir looked at Gu Jinglian, who was secretly sulking in surprise. She then turned to look at the father and daughter, who were snuggling happily in Mu Yaja's arms. She could not believe it. This daughter must be the closest to her father. As soon as she said this, the atmosphere in Gu Jinglian's corner became even gloomier. He took a bite of the cake and said nothing. Chu Ho said helplessly, "Logically speaking, that's what they said. However, Qianqian has also grown up a lot. She can call her mother, brother, and Uncle Fu. She can recognize everyone except for Jing Lian. She cries for me to carry her as if Jing Lian is a demon king." Yun Shishir's mouth twitched when she heard that. Wasn't that right? Wasn't Gu Jinglian the great demon king himself? Could it be that his killing intent was too strong? After all, in the past, a simple stomp of the Gu family's feet could cause a bloodbath. Gu Jinglian was ruthless. It was said that the more powerful a person was, the more murderous he would be. Children, on the other hand, were very intelligent. Normally, when they saw someone with a strong murderous aura, they would cry out of instinct. No wonder Qianqian was no longer close to Gu Jinglian. Yun Shishir only comforted her. "Jinglian, it's okay. The child is still young. When he grows up, he'll naturally be closer to you." Gu Jinglian didn't know if he should nod or sigh. He asked, "Was Yueyao close to his father since he was young?" "That's different." "How is it different?" Yueyao was taken care of by Yaja since he was young. At that time, I was not in good health after giving birth and he couldn't bear for me to tire myself out. He did everything personally for Yueyao, including breastfeeding him. When Gu Jinglian heard this, he said indignantly, "Haven't I done enough personally?" Chu Ho said, "Did you take care of the two little guys as well as I did?" "I cried whenever I got close to them. I couldn't help it. This means that they're afraid of you." "Ah, there's no choice. Your daughter isn't close to you." Gu Jinglian was furious. "That might not be the case when she grows up. Maybe when she grows up she'll still be close to me. Just like Yueyao, she's closest to her father." Chapter 45-54. Yu proudly hugged Yueyao's shoulders. "I'm the one closest to Yueyao. Yueyao likes me the most, right?" Yueyao's innocent eyes darted around, and she immediately slapped her face. No. Yu was speechless. Everyone laughed. Ah. Yu felt a little wronged. She reached out and pinched Yueyao's face. She was angry at her heartlessness, but she couldn't bear to hit her too hard. She only asked eagerly, "Didn't you say that you like Big Brother the most?" "Not anymore." As Yueyao spoke, she looked at Jing Yang and said in a childish voice, "I like Big Brother Yang Yang the most now." Yu looked at Jing Yang resentfully. Indeed. During her stay in the hospital, Yueyao and Jing Yang's relationship was the best. It was so good that it angered both humans and gods. He had been jealous more than once, but because of Xiao Yichen he had been very worried and neglected to take care of Yueyao. "Because Big Brother Yang Yang plays with me." Yueyao said, "I like to play with Big Brother Yang Yang the most." Feeling the sharp stab in his back from Yu's angry glare, Jing Yang was so scared that he buried his head and ate the cake. He acted as if he was an outsider who didn't know anything and looked innocent. Ah! Everyone laughed even more unbridled. No matter who it was, even Yun Shishir, it was rare to see Yu get snubbed like this. Moreover, it was at the hands of Yueyao. However, even so, Yu still couldn't bear to be angry at Yueyao. She looked at Jing Yang with hostility, but when her gaze returned to the back of Yueyao's head, it was full of tenderness. He gently rubbed Yueyao's black hair and said dotingly, "Anyway, no matter who Yueyao likes the most, I will always dote on Yueyao the most." Brother Yichen dotes on Yueyao too. Yueyao pouted. At the mention of Xiao Yichen, she felt a little disappointed. "Yueyao, when will you be able to see Big Brother? Yueyao misses him so much." Although her tone was full of dejection and grievance, she did not stop eating the cake. Everyone stared dumbfoundedly at Yueyao, who was happily eating the cake but was also worried about Xiao Yichen. For a moment, they didn't know whether to feel sad or laugh. Yu comforted her. "Brother Yichen will recover soon." "Really?" Yueyao's eyes sparkled when she heard this. She bit on her cake spoon and looked up at Yu. "What about us? Are we almost done?" "You'll be fine if you eat more." "All right." When she heard that she would be fine after eating more cake, Yueyao ate even more happily. Yun Shishir was a little worried. "Will you gain weight if you eat like this?" After all, there was so much sugar and calories in the cake. Yueyao had standard baby fat. Her face was chubby and with a pinch all her fingers could pinch was meat. It was soft and tender, but there was no meat on her body. Her stomach, however, would bulge like a little ball every time she finished eating. Yu hugged Yueyao lovingly. Such a small glutinous ball even had a strong milky fragrance on her body. He had a feeling that this little sister was made of milk. She had clearly been weaned for a long time, but the milky fragrance on her body was still there. Everyone looked at each other and sighed. Only two people were missing from such a joyous and harmonious scene. The two cakes were carefully kept and sent to the quarantine area by the nurse. Chapter 45-55. A cake? Xiao Bao asked the nurse. "Whose birthday is it?" "Mu Yichen's mother. It's her birthday today, so she said that she can't leave you guys behind." Xiao Bao was a little envious when he heard that. "How nice. We can celebrate our birthdays together." The nurse squatted by the bed and comforted him. "Eat this cake and get better quickly. Then you can leave this place quickly." "Okay. Thank you, Auntie Nurse." When the cake was sent to Xiao Yichen's ward, Xiao Yichen had just finished his drip. When he saw the cake, he immediately remembered that it was Yun Shishir's birthday today. He had been isolated all this time, so he didn't know that the date outside had changed. The concept of time had been deeply blurred because he was isolated from the world. It was a little regretful. He couldn't accompany his mommy and sing her a happy birthday song on her birthday this year. When will I recover? He was really tired of this place. Xiao Yichen was vexed. Back then, when he found out that his illness had worsened, he didn't think much of it. He felt that no matter what, he would be able to turn danger into safety. He was never afraid of death. It was also because of this courage that he didn't take the flu to heart. However, he didn't expect that because of this carelessness, he would become the one with the most serious illness. He had been on the verge of death several times. Until now, it was like a nightmare. He wasn't afraid of death. He was only afraid of separation. The nurse said, "Your mommy asked me to pass on a message to you." When Xiao Yichen heard that his mommy had something to tell him, he sat up excitedly. "What did mommy say to me?" She said, "I'll tell you after you finish eating the cake." Xiao Yichen pouted and said coquettishly, "Nurse, tell me first. Don't bargain with me. This is a cake that your mommy personally made." "What? Don't you want to eat it? If you don't want to eat it, can you give it to me?" "No." Xiao Yichen protected the cake that Yun Shishir had personally made. "Anyway, you can't eat this cake. Don't threaten me." "All right, I'll eat it. Don't eat too much. Too sweet. It won't be good if you spit it out." "Yes." Xiao Yichen obediently picked up the spoon and took a bite of the cake. The cake was sticky, sweet, and mousse, but she didn't feel sick of it at all. Just the right amount of sweetness. It was so delicious that he wolfed it down. "Eat slowly." The nurse's heart ached as she watched him eat the cake. She couldn't help but say, "Your mommy said she misses you a lot." Xiao Yichen paused for a moment and a teardrop fell onto the dining table. He closed his mouth tightly, trying to hold it in, but failed. He carelessly wiped the corners of his eyes. In an instant his eyes were wet. Because he rubbed them, they were red and swollen. Against his pale skin, it made people's hearts ache. "I miss mommy too. So, you have to pull yourself together. Your mommy made a wish today and it must be for you." Wishes couldn't be spoken out loud, otherwise they wouldn't come true. However, everyone knew who the main character of this wish was. Yun Shishir's wish must have been for Xiao Yichen. She hoped that he would get better soon. Xiao Yichen finished all the cake. Actually, he didn't like to eat sweets, but because it was Yun Shishir's birthday and she had personally made the cake, he decided to eat it. Chapter 45-56. At the same time. East Africa. Due to the war, it was extremely difficult to find the only remaining shop. However, Alice managed to find it. Next to the hospital, there was a very dilapidated dessert shop. There was also a display cabinet selling cakes. However, the conditions were limited. The surface of the cake inside looked like it was smeared with very cheap cream. There were many places that had not been smoothed, and the appearance was not exquisite enough. However, it was not easy for her to find this shop in such a remote corner beside the hospital. There was probably a market further away. However, due to the conditions in East Africa and the recent invasion of war, there were refugees everywhere. Many shops that were lucky enough to escape the war had been smashed and robbed by the refugees. A cake like this was not cheap. It actually cost dozens of US dollars. Due to the war, the country's currency had been devalued. Only US dollars were allowed to circulate in the market. Alice bought the cake back. When Hua Jin saw that she had bought the cake, he found it a little strange. "Where did you buy the cake from?" "A shop in a remote corner beside the hospital." A remote corner. He had already said that it was a remote corner, but she had still managed to find it. Alice paused and said, "Luckily it's a remote corner, so it hasn't been robbed clean by the refugees. Many conspicuous shops beside the hospital have been robbed and closed. This place is remote, so it's still open." "It's Xiao Jie's birthday today. Have you prepared a gift?" Hua Jin frowned. "I have prepared it." "What gift?" "It's a secret." Hua Jin glanced at her coldly. "I can't tell you." "What?" "It's not a gift for you. Why are you so agitated?" When Alice heard this, she also asked for a snub and whistled. It must be some shameful gift." With that, she carried the cake in. In the ward, Gong Jie was leaning against the window and drinking coffee. When he saw Alice carrying the cake in, his eyes widened in shock. Previously, Alice had told her that she was going to buy him a cake. Gong Jie was worried that she might be in danger. Alice even joked that she wasn't on the wanted list. She wasn't him, so why would she be in danger? Gong Jie did not think much of it. Although Alice wasn't on the wanted list, she was still a member of the Hurricanes. Even the FBI knew her. In addition, at this time there were ruins everywhere. Why would they go to the ruins to find a cake shop? It was simply wishful thinking. He didn't expect that she would really buy the cake back. Unbelievable. This woman was simply omnipotent. Ever since you were young, you could lack anything on your birthday except for cake. Gong Jie was surprised and touched by Alice's kindness. It was so dangerous, but she still insisted on buying him a cake. Cake wasn't a tradition of the Gong family. It was just that after he was young, when he celebrated his birthday with his elder sister, the most important ceremony was to have a cake. Gong Jie was a very ritualistic person. Every birthday Mu Qingqing would buy them a birthday cake. Although the cake was sometimes big and sometimes small and not enough for 3 people, it was essential to have a cake on a birthday. Chapter 45-57. When it was his birthday, Gong Jie was inexplicably unhappy when he saw that there was no cake. He kept feeling that something was missing. It was as if without the cake he felt that the birthday was missing a little bit. Every time he saw the cake he would think of Mu Qingqing and Yin Shishir. In this way, even if it was his birthday alone, he wouldn't feel lonely. However, without the cake he would feel that he was really alone on his birthday. It was also from that time that Alice really realized that on her birthday, she couldn't lack anything but cake. Otherwise, she wouldn't have tried so hard to find a cake everywhere. In the end, he really found it. Maybe the taste is limited, but I've seen the production environment. It's quite clean. Gong Jie walked to the table and opened the box personally. A cake that wasn't considered round greeted his eyes. There was nothing new about the production. In China, it was the original appearance of a cake from the 60s or 70s. The cake's cream was mixed with cheap coloring. The wavy pattern was written in English, Happy Birthday. The font was crooked and not exquisite at all. Happy birthday. Alice smiled at him. Gong Jie smiled and gently hugged the back of her neck. He planted a kiss between her eyebrows. Thank you. Hua Jin said that. Gong Jie turned to look at him. What? Happy birthday to you. Gong Jie paused and suddenly thought of something. Then, where's the gift that you prepared? Hua Jin inexplicably looked a little guilty. I'll give it to you later. What gift? You're being so mysterious. Gong Jie didn't probe further. He casually dipped his finger in some cream and put it into his mouth. It was unexpectedly delicious. So sweet. Although it was cheap coloring, the cream was actually not bad. The point was, in a background like East Africa, the food had always been bad. The cake placed here was already considered a luxury. Hua Jin also took a bite. His appetite wasn't as picky as Gong Jie's, but he felt that the cake wasn't delicious. He didn't like cream. This year, only Hua Jin and I will celebrate your birthday with you. Alice looked at the cake again. But we were lucky. No matter what, we still found the cake. She actually still remembered. He couldn't live without a cake on his birthday. Gong Jie was a little touched. He pursed his lips and prepared to cut the cake. Hua Jin stopped him. Aren't you going to light a candle and make a wish? Alice chimed in. Yeah, make a wish. Little Jie, make a wish. I don't know what to wish for. Think about it. As Alice spoke, she took out the only candle that the boss had given her and lit it. In the dim candlelight, Gong Jie closed his eyes and made a perfunctory wish. This year's birthday wishes. Hua Jin and Alice looked at him seriously. Gong Jie said, World peace. Hua Jin, Alice was speechless. The two of them tacitly fell silent. World peace. Who was he kidding? They didn't know why, but when this wish came out of Gong Jie's mouth, it didn't sound convincing at all. Hua Jin muttered, With you around, the world won't be peaceful. Gong Jie glanced at him coldly. He casually dipped some cream in it and forced it into his mouth. Eat your cake. Chapter 45-58. He was the biggest obstacle to world peace. 70% of the world's wars were caused by hurricanes. How dare he wish for world peace? When Gong Jie heard this, he glared at him fiercely. Hua Jin suddenly felt guilty and cowered. He quickly raised his wine glass and toasted him. Cheers? That sincere expression of his seemed to be trying to curry favor with him. Gong Jie did not stoop to his level. Alice also poured a glass of wine and clinked it with his. Xiao Jie, I'll toast to you. Unknowingly, half a round of drinking had passed. Alice and Gong Jie had good alcohol tolerance, but tonight the two of them had finished 12 bottles of champagne. Whether it was Gong Jie or Alice, they were both a little drunk. In the end, they were no longer drinking for the sake of drinking, but for the sake of their lives. Gong Jie was still a little sober, but Alice was already beyond drunk. She pointed at Gong Jie, wanting to take advantage of the night to compete with him. Hua Jin could not help her up, so he had no choice but to contact other people. Only then did they drag Alice away. When he returned to the room, he saw Gong Jie leaning against the floor-to-ceiling window with his head leaning weakly against the window. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Hua Jin walk in, but he did not move. Could be seen that he had drunk a lot, so much so that he was dizzy. His whole body was limp and weak like a large doll lying limp by the window. Hua Jin walked over and stretched out his hand, wanting to help him to the bed. However, Gong Jie suddenly looked at him childishly, spread his hands and pursed his lips. He actually had a hint of coquettishness. What? Where's my present? Gong Jie said eloquently, it's my birthday today, and you didn't prepare a present for me? What present do you want? I don't care, I want a present. Gong Jie began to lose his temper. If you don't give me a present, I won't remember. Alright, I'll give you a present. Get up first. Hua Jin was half joking and half fawning. His strength was limited, and drunken people were always scoundrels, so he couldn't do anything to him. Thus, in desperation, Hua Jin tempted him with a birthday present. If you lie down on the bed obediently, I'll give you the birthday present I prepared. When Gong Jie heard this, he smiled meaningfully. You're lying. You didn't prepare a gift for me at all. Gong Jie was suddenly very angry. You don't even know my birthday. How is that possible? Of course I know your birthday. He always remembered Yun Shishir's birthday, and Yun Shishir's birthday was naturally Gong Jie's birthday. He wouldn't make a mistake. He had always remembered Gong Jie's birthday. I promise you, as long as you lie down on the bed, I'll give you your birthday present. When Gong Jie heard this, he really stood up obediently. With Hua Jin's support, he finally walked to the side of the bed and sat down heavily. The soft bed collapsed slightly. The moment Gong Jie lay down on the bed, he hooked his long arm around Hua Jin's neck and pulled him into his embrace. Hua Jin lifted his head from his chest and glared at him angrily. However, he saw him cupping his face and asking seriously, "Where's the present?" God knew how much he couldn't wait to see his present. Chapter 45:59. Look carefully, the gift you want is right here. With that, Hua Jin cupped the man's face in his hands and pressed his lips against the latter's. The sudden kiss made Gong Jie, whose mind was in a mess because of the alcohol, even more dizzy. Originally, he had drunk a few more bottles out of excitement that night, and his whole body was dizzy. Hua Jin's kiss had really wiped out his last bit of rationality. Hua Jin, he actually took the initiative to kiss him. Was his so-called gift referring to this kiss? Or, Gong Jie had no time to think. Almost instinctively, he flipped over and easily pinned him under his body. Pinning the man's hands to the side of the pillow, Gong Jie lowered his head and took the initiative to kiss the other aggressively. Hua Jin's breathing quickened. Only God knew how difficult it was for him to take this step. Ever since Alice said those words to him the day before, he couldn't calm down for a long time. He had always thought that Gong Jie's so-called liking for him was actually just a moment of interest. Most of the liking had nothing to do with love. It was only because of loneliness, because of the desire for warmth, because of a moment of interest. However, after the interest, one would realize that one didn't really like the other person that much. Many feelings were often just the product of loneliness. Hua Jin had always been worried that if Gong Jie knew about Alice's matter, would Gong Jie push him away and be with her because of his guilt towards Alice? However, due to a freak combination of factors, Gong Jie and Alice's attitudes the last time had already made it clear that their friendship would not change. Alice had also told him that it wasn't easy for two people to like each other. Therefore he had to cherish it all the more. Hua Jin thought that this was why he had to take the initiative to take this step. Therefore he used this kiss to express his determination. He liked Gong Jie. He didn't want to deny it anymore. This feeling had already existed since the first time they played dare, when their lips touched through a piece of tissue. His feelings for her were definitely not just a moment of interest. However, at that time he didn't think much of this feeling. He didn't think it was out of love and affection. Therefore he suppressed himself again and again, but he didn't expect that unknowingly he had already fallen deeply. Liking someone was something that couldn't be suppressed. Especially when the other party also liked him. The more he felt suppressed, the more painful it was. If Gong Jie didn't like him, it would be fine. However, Gong Jie also liked him. Since both of them liked each other, then, let's be together. Don't care about the uncertain future or whether they could walk to the end. Love was in the present. At the thought of this, Hua Jin gently hugged the back of Gong Jie's neck and responded to his kiss even more deeply. Unknowingly, half of the shirt on his body had already been taken off. Similarly, Hua Jin followed suit and removed the man's clothes. In the blink of an eye, Gong Jie's strong shoulders were exposed to the air. For some reason, Hua Jin was so nervous about what was going to happen next that his heart almost jumped out of his throat. Chapter 45:60. Gong Jie suddenly lowered his head and whispered into his ear. There's something I've wanted to say to you for a long time. What? I want? Gong Jie gently lifted his chin and kissed him gently. I want you. This impulse had been brewing for a long time. Hua Jin was slightly startled. However, because of his frantic kisses, he could no longer think independently. The night was dreary. In the room it was charming and gentle. When Hua Jin woke up again, the sky was dark as ink. Beside him he could hear Gong Jie's heavy breathing. He drank too much. It was lucky that he did not vomit. When he wanted him, he did not know the main points and did not know how to do it. He hurt him several times. It was like the end of the war. Other than enjoyment, it was more for him to vent the emotions that he had been suppressing. His suppression, Gong Jie's suppression, in the end, turned into energy that filled his body and was injected into the other party's body. When Hua Jin opened his eyes, he felt as if his whole body was filled with cement. He was stiff and could not move. Even when he raised his hand, he felt that his arm was extremely heavy. So thirsty for water. He felt as if the blood in his body had solidified. After much effort, he finally supported his body and got up from the bed. He turned over and got off the bed. When his toes touched the ground, it was as if there was an electric current flowing through his waist. He staggered, his legs went soft, and he fell to the ground. Hiss. It was so painful. Why did it feel as if his waist had collapsed? It was sore and painful. Most importantly, his tailbone in particular was extremely sore. Hua Jin wanted to cry but had no tears. He supported himself on the bed and stood up with difficulty. He walked to the table but could not find water. He walked weakly to the cabinet and poured some cold water. He gulped down a few mouthfuls of water to finally relieve his thirst. He held the glass of water and walked to the window. Through the window he looked not far away. Even though it was far away, he could vaguely see the ruins filled with smoke. Wreckage was everywhere, as if it was the scene after the apocalypse. The whole of East Africa felt like it was the end of the world. Behind him, there was the sound of Gong Jie turning over. Hua Jin turned around and saw that Gong Jie had turned over and fallen asleep again. He walked over to the bed and squatted down. The smell of alcohol from his breath immediately assaulted his nostrils. She didn't know what he was drinking. Hua Jin clearly hated the smell of alcohol, but the smell of alcohol on his body had a kind of orchid fragrance. He gently touched his face. He always felt that such a face, if placed in the past, would have been unreachable. It was within sight but unattainable. He always felt that he and Gong Jie were people from two different worlds. Therefore, even if he liked her, even if he adored her, he would always carefully maintain a distance from her, not daring to get close. However, the more he suppressed it, the more painful it was. On the contrary, he was envious of Gong Jie. He liked someone and loved someone, and he was so open about it. He still remembered that he grabbed him by the collar and said to him, "Let's be together." There was no hesitation at all, no overcautious. There was no turning back. Hua Jin was envious of this carefree attitude. Now he also tried to be carefree for once. The moment he poured out the feelings that he had been suppressing, his whole body felt much more relaxed. Chapter 45-61. 3 days later. Yun Shishir, who had been waiting in the ward, finally received the good news. The first batch of the vaccine had been successfully tested. Xiao Yichen was in the second batch of patients to receive the vaccine. She had heard the news from Chu Ho. During this period, Chu Ho had been following the news closely. Finally, after hundreds of trials, the vaccine had been successfully tested. Yun Shishir could not contain her excitement when she heard the news. Yi was also in the ward. She had just taken her medicine and was a little drowsy. When she heard Chu Ho's words, she immediately sat up in bed. "Really?" Chu Ho nodded. "Yes, it's true. I've confirmed it repeatedly. If there are no accidents, the vaccination will start tomorrow. Xiao Bao is in the first batch and Xiao Yichen is in the second batch." "Really? That's great." She held Chu Ho's hand tightly. She was so excited that her whole body was trembling. Sure, you can rest assured now. The doctor said that if the vaccination is successful, Xiao Yichen and Xiao Bao should be able to leave the quarantine zone very soon." Yun Shishir nodded. "However, because they are in the second batch, we don't know if there are any side effects." Yun Shishir's expression became serious when she heard this. Chu Ho said anxiously, "I've done some research before. Before this, SARS, which is similar to the influenza this time, had wreaked havoc all over the world. However, after the vaccine was tested, although the patients recovered and were discharged from the hospital, because of the vaccine and the ferocity of SARS at that time, after the patients were discharged from the hospital, the side effects gradually appeared. At that time, due to the large use of hormones to suppress the disease, steroid drugs were used in large quantities for emergency treatment. The side effects of the hormones caused some of the patients' femoral head necrosis, diffuse interstitial fibrosis of the respiratory system and ischemic lesions and necrosis of the femoral head of the motor system. Even though they were saved from the disease, they spent the rest of their lives in pain. Yu took a deep breath when she heard this. As long as he survives, everything will be fine. No matter what pain there is in the future, I will accompany him through it. At most, I'll take care of him. He paused for a moment and continued, however, this influenza is different from SARS. I've done my research on Xiao Yichen's treatment plan. I've also analyzed the ingredients of the vaccine this time. There are no harmful ingredients in it. If you really want to list the side effects, it's probably that you'll lose a lot of weight for a long period of time. You'll lose a lot of nutrients because of your body's consumption. Yu spoke with fervor and assurance as he analyzed the situation logically. Chu-He was dumbfounded when she heard this. She stared blankly at Yun Shirshir and asked in disbelief, "How old is Yu?" 11 years old. Chu-Ho was even more amazed. When she thought about Xiao Bao, who was about the same age as Yu, she realized that there would be no harm if there was no comparison. How did she raise a landlord's foolish son, while other people's sons were so smart? Anyway, as long as this vaccine can cure Xiao Yichen, I don't care about anything else. Yu paused for a moment and said, even if his body is damaged because of the influenza, I'll take care of him for the rest of his life. Yun Shirshir hugged Yu and kissed his forehead gently. You good boy. Didn't you say that you've studied the ingredients and that there aren't many side effects? Chapter 4562. Yes, but it's impossible to be foolproof. Even if there are any side effects, Xiao Yichen still has us. Yun Shirshir was worried when she heard this. However, the vaccine was the best solution so far. Yu comforted her, Mommy, don't worry. Although this is the first batch of the vaccine, we've already done a lot of safety testing. Moreover, the vaccine has been strengthened. We've refined the best parts and removed the dangerous parts. All in all, the vaccine is quite safe. Okay, that's good. At this point, they could only take one step at a time. The vaccine had already passed the Phase I clinical trial and Xiao Bao was in the first batch to receive the vaccine. After the vaccination, after 48 hours of observation, the flu symptoms were significantly reduced. After the blood test, the virus was quickly brought under control. Xiao Yichen was also in the second batch to receive the vaccine. The surprising thing was that the vaccine seemed to have an amazing effect on Xiao Yichen. That night, his fever suddenly went down. From the blood test results, his symptoms were obviously recovering faster than the other patients in the same batch. Unbelievable. The doctors were all amazed. Xiao Yichen was really a miraculous child. His illness worsened the fastest and he recovered the fastest after the vaccination. Moreover, after a few days of observation, the vaccine did not have any side effects on his body. The other patients had a strong reaction. Other than vomiting violently and having a high fever, some of the more serious cases even reported that they had lost their sight. 3 days after the vaccination, Xiao Bao also had a reaction. He suddenly had tinnitus. Although it recovered quickly, his immune cells plummeted. In other words, his immune system would become very weak for a period of time. The vaccine killed the bad virus and eliminated the good bacteria. In fact, the adaptability of the vaccine varied from person to person. It had to be said that Xiao Yichen was the chosen one. He was one of the lucky ones. The vaccine did not react at all on him. Xiao Yichen's illness was obviously more serious than Xiao Bao's, but Xiao Yichen was the one who recovered the fastest. He was also one of the first people to leave the quarantine zone. That day, Yun Shirshir and Mu Yaja were at the quarantine area's entrance early in the morning, wearing heavy protective suits. Xiao Yichen was also wearing a thick mask as he lay on the bed. The nurse carefully moved him out of the room. Several attending physicians and vaccine clinical professors were especially excited. They personally sent him off and lit up the fireworks. The moment Xiao Yichen stepped out of the quarantine zone, he sat up excitedly on his bed. He looked around as if he was anxiously looking for someone until he saw Yun Shirshir in the crowd. His eyes flashed fiercely and he stretched out his arms like a spoiled child, asking for a hug from her. When Yun Shirshir saw this, she recklessly rushed out of the crowd to his bedside and hugged him tightly. This hug transcended life and death. It was truly the joy of surviving a calamity. Mommy? It was rare for Xiao Yichen to act like a spoiled child in front of her. Yun Shirshir was inexplicably touched. He intimately rubbed against her in her arms. They had not seen each other for so long. A hug could not dispel the longing he had for her for so long. Chapter 4563. Yun Shirshir couldn't bear to let go of him either. The mother and son hugged each other tightly. They wished that time would stop and stop flowing. The doctors and nurses who were standing at the side were moved. One of the professors said emotionally, Mu Yichen is so capable. He was in the second batch to be vaccinated, but he was the first to leave the quarantine zone. There were adults who were infected with the flu and they were in good health. However, Xiao Yichen was the first to leave the quarantine zone. It was a memorable moment. It was a historic moment. Xiao Yichen was the first person in the capital to overcome the flu. Hence, the professors and doctors were celebrating excitedly. Yun Shishir couldn't take in any of it. She only knew that she could finally hug Xiao Yichen again. She had been thinking about it day and night and finally she wasn't disappointed. "Where's Yu?" Xiao Yichen suddenly asked in her arms. Yun Shishir wiped her tears and quietly turned to the side when she heard this. "Over there." Xiao Yichen followed Yun Shishir's gaze and saw Yu holding Mu Yaja's hand. They stood beside him and quietly looked in his direction. "Go ahead." Mu Yaja couldn't help but laugh when he saw the two little guys looking at each other. "Do you want to give Xiao Yichen a hug?" "Who wants to hug him?" Yu pouted and complained. "He made me wait for so long and he came out so late. Who wants to hug him?" Mu Yaja smiled knowingly when he heard this. This little guy was still so duplicitous even at this moment. God knew how hard it had been for him to fall asleep last night when he found out that Xiao Yichen would be able to leave the quarantine zone the next day. He couldn't fall asleep no matter how hard he tried. He was afraid that something unexpected would happen. Although Xiao Yichen would be able to leave the quarantine zone the next day, Yu was worried that something unexpected might happen. Perhaps his condition would worsen overnight. He appeared to be very indifferent, but in fact he was more anxious and impatient than anyone else. Mu Yaja had no choice but to gently push him from behind. Yu was caught off guard and stumbled a few steps back. He turned around and looked at his daddy with disdain. "Go. Give your brother a hug as a celebration for him." Yu hesitated for a moment before she turned around and walked towards Xiao Yichen. Xiao Yichen quietly watched him walk towards him. He couldn't help but reach out his hands and look at him expectantly. Yu looked at his expectant expression. For some reason she felt a lump in her throat and her eyes turned red. She took a few steps forward and threw herself into Xiao Yichen's arms, hugging his shoulders tightly. "Xiao Yichen." Yu pretended to be calm. He gritted his teeth but he couldn't hide his sobs. He forced out a few words. "Welcome back." Xiao Yichen was so touched that his eyes turned into crescents. Although he was smiling, tears streamed down his face. "I'm home, Yu." Yu, Mu Yichen bit his lip. He couldn't hold back the second half of his sentence. "I missed you. Did you miss me?" Yu nodded gently and said in a choked voice, "Yes, I missed you so much." "How rare." Yun Shishir and Mu Yaja couldn't help but feel emotional. Yu, who had always been arrogant, had finally said, "I missed you." Chapter 45-64. Yun Shishir was so touched that she wiped away her tears. Because of this new lease on life, she thought that she would cherish the happiness of her family of 6 even more in the future. Wealth and power were another matter altogether. Only a healthy and safe life was the most important. Yu and Mu Yichen hugged each other tightly. The two of them turned their heads at the same time and glanced at Yun Shishir and Mu Yaja. Mu Yaja and Yun Shishir walked over and hugged Xiao Yichen and Yu gratefully. The four of them hugged each other tightly, and no one could bear to let go. In the ward, Yueyao held a bouquet of flowers and waited eagerly at the door. She woke up very early in the morning. Yun Shishir had already told her that Xiao Yichen would be returning to the ward this morning, and she would bring Yu to welcome him. Yueyao wanted to go as well, but she was too young, and her immunity was not as high as an adult's. Although the vaccine had been developed, Yueyao still tried her best to avoid going near the quarantine zone with her physical fitness. Hence, under Yun Shishir's repeated coaxing, Yueyao obediently stayed in the ward and waited eagerly for Xiao Yichen's return. Suddenly, the sound of heavy footsteps came from outside the door. Yueyao's ears were sharp and she immediately heard it. She walked to the door excitedly. If she were a little puppy now, her tail would be wagging excitedly. The door finally opened. Yueyao was about to go up to welcome him when she saw Chu Ho push the door open and walk in. When he saw Yueyao standing at the door like a puppy holding a bouquet of flowers, he was dumbfounded. Yueyao immediately wilted when she saw Chu Ho. "What? I thought Brother Yichen was back." Chu Ho didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He walked over and picked Yueyao up. "What's wrong, little Yueyao? Are you waiting for Xiao Yichen?" "Yes. Mommy said that Brother Yichen is coming back today." When Yueyao mentioned Xiao Yichen, her face flushed red. She was obviously very happy. Chu Ho lovingly scratched the bridge of her nose. Sometimes the more he looked at Yueyao, the more he liked her. She thought that it would be great if Chanchan could be as cute as Yueyao when she grew up. Yueyao was quite likable. She was obviously raised like a little princess, but she didn't put on the airs of a princess. "Don't worry, Xiao Yichen will be back soon," Just as they were talking, Yun Shirshir and Mu Yaja's voices came from outside the door. Sensing that her daddy and mommy were back, Yueyao kicked her legs and said that she wanted to come down. Just as Chu Ho put her down, Mu Yaja pushed the door open. Yueyao hurriedly walked over with the flowers in her hands. Suddenly, she bumped into the operating table that had just been pushed open. With a plop, she fell on her butt on the ground. Yun Shirshir was shocked when she saw this. Just as she was about to walk over and carry her, she saw Yueyao nimbly get up from the ground. She patted the dust off her butt and walked toward Xiao Yichen. "Brother?" Xiao Yichen was lying on the bed obediently. When he heard Yueyao's soft voice, he struggled to sit up. He had just been vaccinated and was still recovering. He was weak in all aspects, so when he sat up he was a little out of breath. Just as he sat up, he saw Yueyao walking toward him with the flowers in her hands. "Brother, welcome back." Xiao Yichen was stunned. Chapter 45-65. Yueyao finally peeked her head out from behind the bouquet. She was panting, but she insisted on handing the bouquet to Xiao Yichen. "Brother, welcome back." Mwah. Xiao Yichen was extremely touched. He knew that Daddy and Mommy would come personally to welcome him. Yu would also come personally to welcome him. However, he did not expect Yueyao to look forward to his return so much. In the past, Yueyao had despised him as her brother the most. He did not know why, but Yueyao was not close to him. Usually, when everyone stood in a row in front of her, the first thing she would do was let Yu hug her. She would also let Gong Jie hug her. Then it would be Yun Shirshir and Mu Yaja. After that, it would be his turn. However, he only realized now that he was so precious in Yueyao's heart. Xiao Yichen stretched out his arms and hugged the bouquet in satisfaction. Yueyao blinked and smiled. Her face was round and her eyes were like the moon. She seemed to have grown taller and thinner. He wondered if she had suffered a lot while he was not around. Knowing what Xiao Yichen was worried about, Yun Shirshir quickly explained, "Yueyao and Yu are in the 5th batch of vaccinations. The doctor said that they have already recovered, but to be safe they can only leave after they have been vaccinated." Xiao Yichen nodded and said, "Indeed. By the 5th batch of vaccinations, their condition should have stabilized. The doctor said that if Yueyao was older, she could have been vaccinated earlier. At her age she could only be in the 5th batch. It is relatively safer for her." Okay. Xiao Yichen lifted the blanket and was about to get out of bed. Yun Shirshir immediately stopped him. "Xiao Yichen, the doctor said that you can't get out of bed yet." "It's okay, Mommy." Xiao Yichen smiled at her. Yun Shirshir's heart softened and she silently retreated to the side. Xiao Yichen flipped over and got off the bed. The moment his feet touched the ground, he took a deep breath and held onto the bed to stabilize himself. He hadn't gotten out of bed for a long time. After lying on the bed for so long, he felt that his limbs were about to degenerate. Not only that, he had not exercised for a long time, and his various bodily functions had deteriorated. Every time he moved, his entire body would ache. Xiao Yichen ignored his own body and opened his arms to Yueyao with a smile. "Good girl, Yueyao. Let me give you a hug." When Yueyao saw him get out of bed, she immediately went up to him and called out sweetly, "Brother." He was so small, so how could he know anything? When he saw Xiao Yichen calling for him, he immediately pounced over without hesitation. However, she pounced on him so enthusiastically that Xiao Yichen, who was already weak, suddenly knelt on one knee on the ground. Yueyao was frightened and immediately used all her strength to support him. She held onto his arm and hugged his waist. She looked as though she was about to cry and looked at Yun Shirshir. "Mommy, what's going on?" "Brother seems to be..." Xiao Yichen immediately tried to calm her down. "It's okay. My legs are just a little weak." Yun Shirshir looked at Mu Yaja worriedly. Mu Yaja walked over and helped him up. "Is it because you haven't gotten out of bed for a long time? Is that why it's a little difficult to stand?" Xiao Yichen nodded reluctantly. With Mu Yaja's help, he finally stood up. Yueyao supported him from the side and placed his hand on her shoulder. "Brother, support me. I won't let you fall." Chapter 45-66. Yueyao hugged his shoulders. Even though it was a little strenuous, she still used all her strength to support his body. Yun Shirshir walked over and couldn't help but scratch Yueyao's nose with heartache. "Brother, are you heavy?" Yueyao shook her head and said, "No." Jingyang watched from the side. Ever since Xiao Yichen returned to the ward, he had been hesitant. After hesitating for a long time, he clenched his fists and finally mustered up his courage. He carefully walked forward and asked with a smile, "Brother Yichen, do you want me to help?" Xiao Yichen glanced at him from the corner of his eye and his face turned cold. "Go away." Jingyang smiled. "Okay." He tactfully walked to the side and sat on the bed aggrievedly. Yun Shirshir and Chu Ho looked at this scene in a daze. For some reason they didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It was obvious that Jing Yang wanted to curry favor with Xiao Yichen. After all, he was Yue Yao's brother. Especially since Xiao Yichen had finally returned from death's door and successfully received the vaccine, he naturally wanted to welcome him. In the end, Xiao Yichen especially disliked Jing Yang. He and Yue Yao were so close that Xiao Yichen was most upset about it. Therefore he was unwilling to pay attention to Jing Yang. As a senior Siscon, he still hadn't forgotten that Yue Yao had neglected him and Yu for Jing Yang. Yun Shirshir didn't know whether to laugh or cry at Xiao Yichen's guarded look. Chu Ho whispered, "Why do I feel that it will be difficult for Yue Yao to get married in the future?" Yun Shirshir glanced at her and didn't react for a while. "Look, Yue Yao has 2 brothers who dote on her so much and a father who dotes on her. Whoever wants to marry Yue Yao in the future will have to conquer these 3 men. It's enough for him to suffer." After Chu Ho mentioned it, Yun Shirshir also realized it. She sighed helplessly. "In our family, Yue Yao is the most precious. I'm also worried that he won't be able to get married in the future. Yaja is still fine. When Yue Yao was born, he was like a slave to his daughter. Now that I've brainwashed him, he's much better. However, those 2 guys, Yu and Xiao Yichen, won't let Yue Yao suffer in the future. Yes. I really don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing." Yun Shirshir shook her head. "It can't be anything good. When he grows Yue Yao Yichen, he will definitely have a family's family. If he does, Xiao Yichen and Yue Yao Yichen will definitely not get along with their brother-in-law. On top of that, Yaja is such a difficult father-in-law." For some reason, after hearing Yun Shirshir's words, Chu Ho suddenly sympathized with Yue Yao's future husband. He's still young. When he grows up, perhaps it will be better. Yun Shirshir shook her head. "No, the older he grows, the deeper the bond between the 3 children will be. Actually, everyone has always felt that Yue Yao Yichen and Yu is too dependent on Xiao Yichen and Yu. But in reality, Xiao Yichen and Yu are too dependent on Yue Yao. Yue Yao Yichen has a special meaning to them." "A special meaning?" Chu Ho didn't understand. "What special meaning?" Chapter 4567. I understand now. Chu Ho continued, "Actually, Xiao Bao feels the same way about Chan Chan. However, he likes his younger sister very much, but he doesn't like his younger brother at all." Yun Shirshir was surprised. "Why?" "Maybe it's because the same sex attracts and the opposite sex repels." That was a perfect answer. Yun Shirshir couldn't stop laughing. The atmosphere in the ward was joyous and harmonious. It had been a few days and the ward had been gloomy. Now that Xiao Yichen was back, the cheerful atmosphere finally returned. When Xiao Yichen returned to the ward, he was still on the same bed. Although he couldn't leave the hospital for the time being, at least everything was stable after he was vaccinated. Although the public was still in a state of panic about the spread of the flu, they were still optimistic about the vaccine that was released this time. The atmosphere in the hospital was no longer lifeless. All the patients had new expectations for their lives. Soon Xiao Bao came back with the good news that he could leave the quarantine zone. On the day that Xiao Bao left the quarantine zone, he was in good condition. Although he was in the first batch to receive the vaccine, he came out 2 days later than Xiao Yichen. The doctor confirmed it again and Chu Ho also asked about it. Overall, Xiao Bao's condition was good and stable, but it was slightly worse than expected. As long as he was given more nutrition, there would be no problem. When Xiao Bao came out of the quarantine zone, Xiao Yichen had almost recovered. Ever since he left the quarantine zone and returned to the ward, Yun Shirshir was full of energy. Every day she would eat fish soup and bones to nourish Xiao Yichen's body. She couldn't wait to quickly recover in 3 to 5 days. Xiao Yichen regained a lot of energy after eating so much fish and meat as well as fruits and vegetables. Therefore, not long after, he could get out of bed and jump around. Xiao Yichen's physical strength had decreased a lot after he was born with the disease, so he started to exercise after he recovered. He had to do 100 sets of push-ups every day. When Xiao Bao came out of the quarantine zone, he was even sicker than Xiao Yichen. He lay on the bed, unable to move at all. If it weren't for Xiao Yichen, Chu Ho would have been worried sick. However, when he thought about how Xiao Yichen had been like this when he came out and how he was still as lively as ever under Yun Shirshir's care, Chu Ho wasn't worried at all. The welcoming ceremony was naturally very grand. When Xiao Bao was pushed into the ward, there were fireworks and a small Corolla made by Yue Yao. However, Xiao Bao couldn't do anything other than lie on the bed. Chu Ho walked over to Xiao Bao with heartache and picked him up. Xiao Bao said weakly, "Mom, can you fulfill a wish of mine?" "What wish?" Xiao Bao pouted and tears almost fell from his eyes. "I want to eat ice cream." Everyone was silent. There was a long dead silence. Xiao Yichen was the first to laugh. Ha ha ha. Ice cream. Xiao Bao's first goal after coming out of the quarantine zone was to eat ice cream. Chuho didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Xiao Bao cried out pitifully, "In the quarantine zone, no one let me eat ice cream. I haven't eaten ice cream in a long time." Chapter 45-68. Chuho did not know whether to laugh or cry. She could not bear to see him like this. However, given Xiao Bao's current condition, he could not eat ice cream. Hence, she had no choice but to coax him. Okay. You can eat ice cream after you've completely recovered, okay? Xiao Bao did not give up. I want to eat it. I want to eat it. I've been holding it in for a long time. I feel like I'd rather die without ice cream. When Yu heard this, she mocked. Impressive, Xiao Bao. You actually know how to use idioms. Looks like my training of you wasn't in vain. Xiao Bao ignored Yu. Xiao Yichen said, "Let him eat it. I think he can't wait to go back to the quarantine zone." Xiao Bao was instantly terrified. What does eating ice cream have to do with going back to the quarantine zone? The doctor didn't let you eat ice cream because if you eat it, it's cold and sweet. If your cough recurs and you develop pneumonia, you'll have to go back. Ah. Xiao Yichen said, eat it. Do you want me to buy it for you? Yun Shishir reminded him weakly, Xiao Yichen, you can't leave the ward yet. Mommy will buy it for him. Xiao Bao suddenly snorted in a fit of pique. Forget it. I'm not eating it. Everyone smiled knowingly. Xiao Bao was probably the most cowardly and afraid of death among this group of children. There was no use in making threats and promises. If they told him directly that eating ice cream would worsen his condition, it would mean that he would have to be on countless drips and injections, and that would be enough to scare him. Xiao Bao raised his hand to show Chu Ho the dense needle marks and the residual needles on his hand. He sought comfort. Mommy, look at my hand. After being on the drip for a long time, both his arms were slightly swollen. Due to the long period of infusion, the needle in his left hand was almost gone, so he switched to his right hand. If his right hand wasn't enough, he switched to his forehead and instep. In short, Xiao Bao felt that when he drank water, water would seep out from these densely packed needle holes. Xiao Yichen disagreed. TSK. How delicate. I get more injections every day than you do. What did I say? Xiao Bao glanced at Xiao Yichen with a gloomy expression. Who wants to be compared to you? You're not human. What kind of normal child would play with a gun? What kind of normal child would practice handstands in the ward when he was so ill? Mom, I'm telling you, Xiao Yichen is a pervert. For a period of time, he did handstands in the ward every day. At that time, Xiao Bao was already paralyzed on the bed, and it was difficult for him to get up. Suffering from the flu and lying down for a long time, she was basically lifeless. Xiao Yichen explained, at that time I felt weak all over, so I thought that I should exercise. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to get out of bed. Yun Shishir was speechless. The doctor and nurse had already told her about this. Xiao Yichen thought that his muscle weakness was caused by being bedridden for a long time. Therefore, he forced himself to do handstands and push-ups. Even when his condition worsened, he could still do a few sets a day. What was even more perverse was that his appetite was not bad. It was so good that it made one's hair stand on end. It was because he ate too much that he vomited after eating, and his stomach almost burned out. Actually, the muscle weakness was caused by the long period of infusion. In addition, he didn't have enough nutrition, so he couldn't eat and drink too much. He could only eat in moderation. Chapter 45-69. Every time the nurse saw him, the latter would be stunned. Yun Shishir even suspected that his good health had been damaged because of him. Today is a day worth celebrating. Chu Ho had always been serious. Now that Xiao Bao was finally released from prison, she smiled happily. Today is the day that the two little guys are reborn. No matter what, it would be great if we could have a good drink tonight. Yun Shishir's eyes lit up when she heard that. That's a really good suggestion. Muyaja said, it would be even better if there was red wine. Chu Ho shook her head. It's such a hot day. Why don't we drink beer? It'll relieve the heat and we won't get drunk easily. Yun Shishir seemed to have figured something out. In that case, Chu He's alcohol tolerance doesn't seem to be very good. Chu Ho retorted, better than you. Yun Shishir suddenly turned her head and said to Muyaja, let's have a good drink tonight? Okay. It's rare to be so happy. After such a long period of worrying, Yun Shishir felt uneasy day and night and found it hard to close her eyes. Now she could finally breathe a sigh of relief. Her desire to drink was so strong. Muyaja heard that and patted her head helplessly. I know. Let's have a drink. I'll make an exception for you tonight. Okay. Chu Ho suddenly said, I know a really good place. At night, it's quiet and the wind is comfortable. Also, no one will disturb you. Yun Shishir reminded him, you can't leave the hospital. It's in the hospital. Where? You'll know tonight. Chu Ho said mysteriously. At night, Yun Shishir went to the supermarket to buy a lot of cooked vegetables. They were the kind that had been processed and could be eaten directly. Although they weren't exquisite and were relatively cheap, most office workers who didn't have time to cook would go to the supermarket to buy cooked vegetables. The taste was definitely not top-notch, but it was still not bad. After buying cooked vegetables, a case of beer, peanuts, and kimchi, the group of people entered the hospital under the cover of the big meal. Chu Ho led a group of people to the balcony of the hospital. It turned out that the perfect place she was talking about was the hospital's balcony. It was big and spacious. During the day, many doctors and nurses would wash their work clothes and dry them here. At night, all the clothes would be taken away, leaving only the bare clothes rack. After moving the clothes rack away, Yun Shishir spread out the soft cushions she bought on the balcony. It was a very large area and the group of people sat on it. Xiao Yichen and Yu Yu were the first to lie down. As the night breeze blew, they felt extremely comfortable. So comfortable. When Chu Ho heard this, he said proudly, comfortable, right? What do you think about this place? Mu Yaja praised from the bottom of his heart. I'll give you a first-class merit. Everyone sat down on the cushions. Yun Shishir couldn't wait to put the fragrant cooked vegetables on the small table one by one. Mu Yaja opened the can of beer. It was the first time he and Gu Jinglian had eaten like this. Although many of the cooked dishes looked strange, the aroma and the fact that they were really hungry stimulated everyone's appetite. These are pig's ears. Try it. Yun Shishir urged Mu Yaja. Mu Yaja picked up one with his chopsticks and put it in his mouth. It was very chewy. It was fragrant and crispy. It was surprisingly delicious. Is it good? Chapter 45-70. Mu Yaja was a little surprised. He did not expect these cooked dishes, which cost more than 10 yuan per serving, to be so delicious. Perhaps it was because he was in a good mood as he sat on the balcony with the night breeze blowing. After all, Xiao Yichen had come back from the gates of hell, so he had put all his worries aside. He felt that the burden on his shoulders had suddenly been lifted. Therefore, he felt that whatever he ate tasted better than sitting in a 5-star hotel or a 3-star Michelin restaurant. Gu Jinglian was also in a good mood. Although he usually despised Xiaobao to death, Gu Jinglian often had nightmares when Xiaobao was sick. He often comforted himself that Xiaobao was lucky and would not be defeated by a mere influenza. However, Xiao Yichen's critical illness had also frightened him. Perhaps one would only know how to cherish something when faced with loss. Ever since Xiaobao returned to the ward, Gu Jinglian's attitude towards him had become especially gentle. It was to the extent that Xiaobao was a little uncomfortable. Sure enough, he was used to being abused. Being treated so gently all of a sudden made him uncomfortable all over. He missed the old Gu Jinglian who used to be so rough with him. Chu Ho thought to himself, this father and son pair, one is a sadist and the other is a masochist. Come. Yun Shishir held a bottle of beer and raised it high. Let's celebrate the glorious return of Xiao Yichen and Xiao Bao. When everyone heard this, they laughed and raised the bottles of beer in their hands. Cheers. Cheers. Ding. 5 or 6 bottles of beer clinked together. Everyone was in a good mood and finished the beer in one gulp. Xiao Yichen watched as Yun Shishir gulped down the entire bottle of beer. He also felt a little hungry. He tugged at her sleeve and said, Mommy. I want to drink beer too. Children are not allowed to drink. Chu Ho had just taken a sip when he suddenly realized what was going on. He exclaimed, What kind of beer is this? Yun Shishir raised her eyebrows and said, I bought it casually. The beer should be the same. This beer has a strong aftertaste. He took a closer look at the logo and was left speechless. Wuxia beer. On the label, the words Wuxia were especially eye-catching. Yun Shishir was a little startled. What's wrong? Wuxia beer. I think this beer is quite expensive, so it should be delicious. Cough. This is Wuxia Wuxia. Wuxia. Yu was shocked. Killer Wuxia. Wuxia Wuxia Wuxia, it could not. How could a supermarket sold Wuxia? He held her forehead and explained, turn the bottle upside down. Wuxia, in other words, an N in Wuxia. Wuxia of Wuxia Wuxia, then N. What's wrong? Is there something wrong? Some people jokingly say that the English words on the label are the abbreviation for kill you all. Mu Yaja understood. This means that the aftertaste of this beer is very strong. For people who are not used to drinking it, the aftertaste is quite strong. Chu Ho thought to herself. No wonder the taste was so familiar. She had drunk a bottle when she was at work and the aftertaste was unusually strong. She did not feel anything at first, but when she was full and stood up, she felt a lack of oxygen in her brain. Then she felt as if she was walking on air. This beer actually doesn't taste that good. It's so expensive, Gu Jinglian complained. Chapter 4571. Weird taste. Gu Jinglian mocked. Chuho didn't know whether to laugh or cry. What? You're not used to it, so you won't allow others to say that it's good? Gu Jinglian said, it tastes so bad. Yun Shirshir put her hands on her hips and said, I was the one who bought the beer. He dares to say that it doesn't taste good. Ah. Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen looked at each other and laughed knowingly. Beside them, Yueyao took advantage of Yun Shirshir's carelessness and secretly took a sip of the beer. She frowned when she tasted the beer. Wow. It tastes terrible. Xiao Yichen quickly snatched the beer back from Yueyao and said angrily, You've learned how to drink secretly. You little rascal. I thought it would taste good, but it turns out to be so terrible. Yueyao frowned in disdain. Everyone was amused by her and burst into laughter again. Yun Shirshir hugged the beer bottle and looked up at the night sky. The moon was full. The happiest thing in life was a family reunion. She gently rested her head on Muyaja's shoulder and sighed comfortably. East Africa. At the hospital. Suddenly there was a burst of thunder outside the window. Hua Jin suddenly woke up and sat up from the bed in shock. What's going on? Calm down. Gong Jia was sitting by the window and looking at the smoke outside. They're fighting again. They're fighting again? Yeah. Hasn't the war already stopped? Gong Jia smiled mysteriously. The war stopped because the military had run out of ammunition and food. With the intervention of the international organizations, there's no more ammunition. Since there's no war preparation, why are they fighting now? Because, Gong Jia said meaningfully, Hurricane gave them enough ammunition. Hua Jin was stunned. Gong Jia had stayed in the hospital for so long without making a move. He had asked everyone to wait carefully because he was waiting for this? He took advantage of this period of time and ordered Hurricane to provide all the ammunition to the war maniacs at the relay station in East Africa. Then he wanted to take advantage of the chaos to leave this barren land? Then what should we do now? It's about time. Gong Jia turned around. Hua Jin saw that he had been armed from head to toe while he was sleeping. Clean and tidy combat uniform, long combat boots, bulletproof armor, and a full set of equipment behind his waist. Gong Jia looked especially dashing in his uniform. More importantly, his handsomeness was not just superficial. The reason why the FBI had assigned so many people to be on standby was because they knew that Gong Jia was a formidable target. So they had to be on their guard. This is your bulletproof vest and combat uniform. Also, you just need to carry these two guns with you when you follow me. One was a rifle and the other was a pistol. Hua Jin was not proficient in firearms. These two guns were only for self-defense. Hua Jin braced himself and equipped himself with both guns. He asked with some concern, Will I be a burden to you? Gong Jia glanced at him coldly. Of course you will. Gong Jia said unhappily, I told you to stay in Hurricane but you didn't. So you came all the way to East Africa just to be a burden to me? Of course not. Hua Jin held the rifle and frowned. I'm worried? Worried about me? Yeah. Chapter 4572. I'm not as weak as you think. But, Hua Jin said seriously, Alice looked very nervous, so I thought you were in danger. She's not wrong. If I were to be arrested by the FBI and sent to the military court, it would be troublesome. But how could I let those idiots arrest me so easily? Alice was confused because she was concerned about him. All right. Hua Jin raised both his hands in surrender. Just take it that I'm causing trouble for you. Gong Jia looked at him deeply and suddenly walked in front of him. He stretched out his hand, held the back of his neck, and gently rested his head on his chest. I'm very happy that you're here. Hua Jin listened to his powerful heartbeat and his uneasy mood calmed down a little. Gong Jia, have you really decided? You've decided to be with me? Hua Jin was still a little doubtful. Why did you decide to be with me? I don't know. When it comes to relationships, no one can be sure. I was wondering why my sister would like a guy like Muyaja. After a pause, Gong Jia closed his eyes. But now I'm relieved. Whether it's liking or being moved, it's usually a matter of a single thought. A single thought, Hua Jin couldn't help but smile. Is this what love at first sight means? Gong Jia pursed his lips. Is it? I only know that I really hated you when I first saw you. Hua Jin, hated? Hua Jin was doubtful. Why do you hate me? Why do you have to monopolize my sister? Gong Jie frowned slightly. My sister belongs to me alone. Why should she have a younger brother like you? Oh, Hua Jin replied. It's like this. At that time I had a very special feeling for Shirshir. At first I thought that I must have fallen in love with her to have such a special feeling. Later on, I realized that the kind of warmth she gave me was the kind of warmth that belonged to a family. Perhaps it was because I didn't have any concept of family since I was young, so being with her gave me a sense of belonging. Plus, she's a little older than me. Upon hearing this, Gong Jie's usually cold eyes instantly softened. From now on, wherever I am, it will be your home. When Hua Jin heard this, he was deeply moved. All right, it's settled then. The two of them looked at each other. At this moment, Alice's voice suddenly came through the radio. Little Jie, it's time to act. Gong Jie put on his headset and replied expressionlessly, gather at the port in half an hour. Yes, be careful. After Gong Jie finished speaking, he turned to Hua Jin and said, you follow me. Don't act on your own, understand? Do you need me to shoot? No need. Then these two guns? When I'm down, it'll be time for you to protect me. Do you understand? Hua Jin nodded. Gong Jie walked to the window, pulled open the curtains and counted down in his heart. 5, 3, 1. Boom. There was a loud explosion. The artillery shell blasted a huge crater 300 meters away from the hospital. A row of houses were on fire. Originally, there was a shelter for refugees near the hospital. Now, all the refugees had gathered at the hospital, and it had become a wasteland. In the hospital, someone screamed hysterically, air raid. It's an air raid. Chapter 4573. The air raid alarm went off instantly. Outside the corridor, doctors and nurses were rushing around. Quick! Everyone gather and take refuge in the hospital's air raid shelter. There's an air raid. Everyone pay attention. This hospital usually accepted the wounded from the war. Originally, in the war-torn zone, there was a shortage of resources and medical equipment. They could only treat some external injuries. Refugees who were infected with the plague were not accepted by the hospital. Most of the patients were either missing an arm or a leg. With the help of the nurses, they struggled to run to the underground air raid shelter. Gong Jie grabbed Hua Jin's hand and broke through the door. As soon as he broke through the door, Hua Jin saw the long corridor full of injured people. The corridor was packed with people. There are so many people. Follow me. Gong Jie pulled Hua Jin and stuck close to the wall. They avoided the panicking injured people and finally arrived at the staircase. Unlike those who were using crutches or supporting the injured with broken arms, they had all four limbs and were able to move freely. They went down to the first floor in no time. Gong Jie saw the FBI agents guarding the entrance at a glance. All of them had blonde hair and blue eyes. They were particularly eye-catching in the crowd of dark-skinned people. Gong Jie and Hua Jin, on the other hand, were conspicuous. The FBI agents also noticed them immediately. Reporting, target spotted. Attack. Execute the arrest plan. A few blonde men broke through the crowd and walked toward Gong Jie and Hua Jin with difficulty. Gong Jie turned around and glanced at the floor-to-ceiling window in the corridor. He pushed Hua Jin away a little. Then, with a powerful roundhouse kick, he shattered the floor-to-ceiling window. Crash! The glass shattered all over the floor. Gong Jie grabbed Hua Jin's hand and rushed out with him. Behind them, they heard American English with a New York accent. Don't hurt the refugees. Attention! Unless absolutely necessary, don't shoot. Don't hurt the target, don't hurt the innocent. When the FBI carried out their plan, they first had to comply with international security laws. No matter how special the situation was, they could not harm refugees or citizens of other countries. This was also part of Gong Jie's plan. Create chaos. Taking advantage of the chaos, they could shake off the FBI's pursuit. In fact, things were going according to his plan. Gong Jie held Hua Jin's hand and rushed through the crowd to find his men guarding outside the door. Two of the mercenaries had already driven a car over. When they saw Gong Jie and Hua Jin running over, the car immediately started. Gong Jie helped Hua Jin into the car first. The engine had already started and the car was already more than 10 meters away. He ran a few steps and jumped into the car. With one hand on the car door and the other holding the gun, he turned around and saw the two agents chasing after him at lightning speed. He took out his gun, aimed at one of the men's knees and shot twice. When the other agent saw that Gong Jie was about to leave, he couldn't hold back anymore. He raised his wrist and aimed his gun at Gong Jie's knees. Hua Jin saw it, but before he could shout, Gong Jie had already made the first move. Bang! He shot that man's wrist. Ouch! The car quickly shook them off. Gong Jie got into the car and slammed the door shut. He smoothed his messy hair and finally heaved a sigh of relief. Hua Jin asked, "Are we safe now?" "Not yet. Before we board the ship, we are still in danger." Gong Jie turned his head and looked at Hua Jin. "Are you scared?" Chapter 4574. There was a kind of superstition about him. He always felt that Gong Jie, this man, was omnipotent. As long as he was here, even if the sky fell down and the world ended, he would protect him and ensure his safety. The car drove towards the port. Hua Jin suddenly asked suspiciously, "Will there be FBI agents at the port?" "I don't know." Gong Jie looked at the back of the car through the window and did not see anyone chasing after them. Now that there's a riot, those American guys should be panicking. After Gong Jie said that, Hua Jin still did not let down his guard. Until the car reached the port, everything was unbelievably smooth. Alice was already waiting at the port. When she saw Gong Jie and Hua Jin, she immediately walked over. "Here again?" Hua Jin held his forehead with a headache. "The last time I was here, I think I was kidnapped to East Africa. Not long after, I'm revisiting the old place." "Don't tell me you can't bear to leave East Africa and refuse to leave." "No." Hua Jin immediately showed a frightened expression. "I can't wait to put on my wings and leave this place." "All right, cut the crap. Hurry up and get on the boat." Alice kicked Hua Jin's back and chased him onto the boat. Feeling aggrieved, Hua Jin turned around and glared at her resentfully. "Violent woman. If you continue to talk nonsense, I won't use this to chase you onto the boat." As Alice said that, she pulled out a gun from her waist belt and aimed it at him. Hua Jin was so frightened that he quickly shrunk his shoulders and boarded the boat. Gong Jie stepped onto the boat ladder and turned around to look at Alice. He wanted to say something but stopped. In the end, he did not say anything. Alice looked at him and suddenly smiled. "Why are you looking at me?" "Nothing." Gong Jie casually threw the gun at her. Alice caught it and shook her head helplessly. She took the opportunity to clip the gun behind her waist. With just a glance, they understood each other's intentions. Alice exhaled, turned around, and boarded the ship. The armed cargo ship gradually left the port. Hua Jin leaned against the bow of the ship and looked at the distant mountain peak. "Peace is great. It's great to live in a peaceful country. Life was too fragile. Therefore he had to cherish the present and grasp the present." Gong Jie walked to his side and leaned against the bow with him. He gently bumped his shoulder and asked, "What are you thinking about?" "I'm thinking that it's precisely because life is so fragile that we should cherish it even more." Gong Jie smiled deeply. "You don't have to cherish life. You just have to cherish me." "What do you mean by cherishing?" "Seize every minute and second of being together." Gong Jie rarely said such romantic words. Hua Jin was flattered. He stared at him. Suddenly he leaned over, put his arms around the back of his neck and kissed him deeply. He rarely took the initiative to kiss him. Gong Jie smiled and hugged his shoulders. While enjoying the kiss, he also deepened the kiss. This was a kiss after surviving a disaster. It was also a kiss that Hua Jin had been late for a long time. Under the setting sun, Gong Jie and Hua Jin kissed tightly. The warm rays of the sunset poured down on their bodies, softly plating their figures with a layer of gold. They were so beautiful that they looked like sculptures. Alice stood at the head of the lower deck. Separated by the railing, the sea breeze blew on her face. It had been a long time since she felt cool. Chapter 4575. In a dilapidated house in the capital. It had just rained heavily and even the air felt damp. In addition, there was also the smell of green grass in the air. Byran did not like this smell very much. She sat in front of the table by the window and looked out of the window in a daze. She did not like the wet grass smell in the air, but she had to open the window to get some fresh air after the heavy rain. The table in front of her was very old. When she was studying, this table was piled full of review questions and homework. After graduation, it was cleaned up a little and became a simple dressing table. There were some cheap skincare products on it, the most basic moisturizing products. A facial mask was only 5 yuan, but it was still a little extravagant for her, who had just graduated and only had a salary of 4 to 5,000 yuan. She did not dare to be too extravagant. She applied it once every 4 days on her face, neck, and knees. In short, she made the best use of everything. Although she had just graduated and her salary was not high, Byran had been very vain since she was young. Sitting in front of the mirror, Byran looked at her face in the mirror and was slightly lost in thought. The 24-year-old Byran had already grown into a slender and elegant woman. She looked like a beauty. "Byran, are you ready?" Someone shouted outside the door. Bai Ran gently patted her face that was stiff because of nervousness and hurriedly stood up. Yes, I'm ready. She walked into the narrow living room and saw a middle-aged woman waiting for her. Seeing that she was wearing ordinary clothes, she could not help but feel a little disgusted. How can you dress like this for such a big event like a blind date? Don't you think it's embarrassing? Auntie, I don't have any nice dresses. This is the most decent one. Bai Ran paused and asked tentatively, so it's another blind date? How many blind dates have you had this week? Since don't let me down. You're not young anymore. It's better to get married early. Bai Ran said weakly, Auntie, I'm only 24 years old. Marriage is not urgent, right? You're not in a hurry, but I'm not in a hurry? How long do you want me to take care of you? Bai Ran's breathing suddenly became rapid. There were several times when she wanted to leave this house, but she had just started working and did not have much savings. It was not easy to save a few thousand yuan, but it was not even enough to pay the rent. The memories of his childhood were already very distant. She vaguely remembered that when she was in kindergarten, her parents had left her in a car accident, along with the child she was pregnant with. Overnight, there was only one person left in the warm home. However, the pain of losing his parents was not as deep as it had been with the passage of time. After that incident, she lived with her grandparents and returned to her hometown to study. However, when she was in junior high school, her grandfather passed away from lung cancer. On the 7th day of her grandfather's death, her grandmother died of a myocardial infarction due to the heavy blow. She died suddenly in front of her grandfather's memorial tablet. From then on, she was kicked around like a ball in front of her uncles and aunts. In the end, it was her youngest aunt who was merciful and took her to her side, providing for her food, clothing, and education. His aunt's surname was Jiang. In order to settle down, Bai Kun temporarily followed his uncle's surname, Jiang Bai Kun. Chapter 4576. However, after graduation, her aunt kept urging her to go on blind dates. There was a premise to this. Her aunt had a son, but he was not proficient in his studies and did not even pass high school. In the end, after graduating from technical school, he did not do a proper job and always stayed at home playing games on his computer. Little aunt had placed all her hopes on her. However, Bai Ran had just graduated from university. As a fashion designer, how much could she achieve as a fledgling? Therefore, this conservative woman felt that it was useless for a woman to study until university. It was better for her to get married as soon as possible. However, blind dates were definitely not that simple. This little aunt had conditions for the blind date. The first requirement for the person she found for Bai Ran was that he had a successful career. Even if he did not have a successful career, he had to be rich. As a betrothal gift, a house in the capital had to be transferred to her son's name. The first blind date was with a demolition family. A house in the capital had been demolished, and he was worth hundreds of millions. However, he was divorced and had a child. The second blind date was with a small boss, but he was old. She had gone on blind dates several times, and he was not younger than 35 years old. Bai Ran was angry. What did they take her for? Every time she protested, her aunt would take it for granted. She had raised her for so long, studied in the capital, and spent money on food and clothes. Now that she was of age, shouldn't she repay her? Her uncle's family was in the capital and they were old citizens. Other than the old and broken house left behind by their grandparents, their son was getting married, and they did not have a wedding house. Which girl would be willing to marry a man who did not do a proper job and had no education or ability? And a family of 4 squeezed into a 50-square-meter house? Bai Ran was young and beautiful, so she was naturally the target of her aunt's expectations. Bai Ran naturally brushed off the first few blind dates. She thought that she could finally stop. Not long after, she found another person for her. Today she did not know how to brush it off. Bai Ran took the address and walked out of the neighborhood. Suddenly she felt very sad. She just wanted to do her job properly. Yi Yuqin watched Bai Ran leave the neighborhood with a gloomy face. What sin have I committed to bring back such a money-losing thing? If she drives away the blind date today, I will definitely chase her out with a broom. A middle-aged man's lazy voice came from behind. What kind of person did you find for her today? Yi Yuqin turned around. She was quite satisfied at the mention of her blind date. I heard that he's the boss of a renovation company. He's quite rich and agreed to my conditions. He has seen her photo. As long as she agrees, any condition is negotiable. Who knows, she might have angered them away again. She's really capable in this aspect. She dares. Yi Yuqin was infuriated. I was having a good conversation. She dares to push me away again. They took the bus to the subway and finally arrived at the cafe in the city center after passing through the crowd. After the rain, the sun soon came out and it became a little stuffy. This cafe was one of the more famous ones in the capital. Sitting in the cafe, Byran added the man's WeChat and sent a message, "I'm here. Wait for me, I'll be there soon." Chapter 4577. Temperament was really a magical thing. Just by looking at this handsome back, she could vaguely imagine that it should be a young and handsome man. She retracted her gaze and looked out of the window, only to see a middle-aged balding man hurriedly passing by the window. She looked at him until she saw him walk into the coffee shop. Suddenly she had a bad premonition. Byran stared blankly as the man walked in front of her and said in a very apologetic tone, Sorry, I'm 5 minutes late. Did you wait long?" "No, I just arrived too." Byran's face stiffened as she clenched her fists. She actually didn't have any expectations, but she didn't expect that her aunt would find a man of this age for her. The man politely raised his hand, tucked his sparse hair behind his ear and sat down. "Do you want something to drink?" "I'm fine. Milk coffee, is that okay?" "Yes." The man called the waiter over and ordered 2 cups of coffee and some desserts. Then he turned his head and looked at the girl opposite him. It could be seen that the Byran opposite him was young, immature, and had a hint of immaturity. Her appearance was beautiful and exquisite. Most importantly, her temperament was excellent, with a hint of scholarly aura. It was said that she was a graduate of a famous university. In that case, her brain was also very bright. For a businessman like him, when looking for a partner, he also looked at the other party's education. The man smiled and said, "Let me introduce myself first. My name is Mo Kong. I'm 39 years old this year. I've been married twice before, but I don't have any children. What about you?" Byran lowered her eyes and didn't look at him. Byran, 24 years old. "I just graduated. Do you have a job?" "Yes." "Let me tell you about my general situation." The man began to introduce himself. From the renovation company he ran, the size of its scale, the annual benefits, how many apartments he had in the capital, how much the property fee was per square meter, how much the property fee was per square meter, how much the car he drove, and even the annual insurance premiums of the car would be taken out to brag. His mouth, other than a mouthful of teeth that were yellowed by smoke, was filled with a strong sense of superiority. The more Byran listened, the more disgusted she became. The man was boasting while paying attention to Byran's expression. However, he didn't see any yearning or interest on her face. Instead, he saw a kind of boredom. "What happened?" the man asked with concern. "I've said so much, but you haven't told me about yourself." Byran sighed, "Mr. Mo, to tell you the truth, this blind date with you was forced by my aunt." "Yes, I know," the man said with a knowing tone. Byran continued, "Actually, I haven't decided to get married yet." The man's face stiffened. "You don't plan to get married? Are you rejecting me? Or, did he want to use this opportunity to raise more conditions?" Byran took a deep breath and said, "You're very good. I can't match you. So, Mr. Mo, why don't you look for someone else for the blind date?" She wanted to end this blind date in a perfunctory manner. After she finished speaking, she was about to pick up her bag. Just as she was about to get up, the man's face suddenly darkened. "You and your aunt are singing the same tune. Are you playing with me?" "No." Chapter 4578. Jianghu, I think you still haven't figured it out, have you? Your aunt has told me everything about you. Do you really not know what she's thinking right now, or are you pretending not to know? She's in a hurry to marry you off, do you know that? Byran was stunned and fell onto the sofa. I was wrong. She's not marrying you off. She just wants to sell you to me. I'll buy it, okay? What did you say? The man knocked on the table. I heard that your cousin has never worked since he graduated from a technical school. Does your aunt have any other houses? Who doesn't want to have a house and a car when they get married now? But why don't you look at the current property prices? They're easily tens of thousands of yuan per square meter. As for me, I'm sincere. If you're willing to marry me, then as a betrothal gift, I'll give your aunt a house. This is also your aunt's request. As for you, follow me. As long as you give birth to a fat boy for me in the future, you can enjoy life with me. Byran's face turned ashen. She thought that Yi Yuqin would despise her, but she didn't think that she was being sold. Was this a blind date? Was this human trafficking? A house in exchange for a wife. How could she make such an outrageous request? If it weren't for the fact that you're young, beautiful, highly educated, and have never had a boyfriend in school, with your conditions, a house of more than 10 million yuan? That's too flattering of you. The man paused for a moment, then said, I heard that you've been on a blind date a few times, and they've all been angered back by you. Your aunt has some complaints about this. It's not that I want to criticize you, but you're too willful. Your parents died early and your aunt worked hard to raise you. Don't you know how to be grateful? Besides, am I not good enough? We definitely won't treat you shabbily for your food and clothing. Byran was so angry that her entire body froze. Byran, don't think too highly of yourself. You know very well what your background is. I'm with you, you're the one who made a fortune. Before he could finish, Byran said, Scram. What? Scram? Byran stood up and threw her bag at him. I told you to scram. Did you hear me? The man was infuriated by her attitude. He originally wanted to scold her, but when he looked around and saw that there were so many people watching, he suddenly felt embarrassed. He spat and left without looking back. Baikun slumped down powerlessly. She wanted to hold it in, but more and more criticism came from around her. Finally, she couldn't hold back the humiliation in her heart and sobbed. Woo 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 woo, the people around her kept looking at her. A blind date? What kind of parent is this? She actually found such a man for her daughter. How ungentlemanly. Haven't you heard? Her parents died a long time ago and she was raised by her aunt. He's being disliked. How pitiful. Diagonally in front, the straight back slowly turned around. The man looked in the direction of Byran and saw her sitting on the sofa in a sorry state. His handsome eyebrows furrowed slightly. He didn't know why, but when he saw her red eyes, his heart was slightly moved. He suddenly stood up and walked towards her. Baihao stooped and gritted his teeth. He was crying silently when a handkerchief was handed to him. Chapter 4579. Baiyu looked up blankly, only to meet the man's pitiful gaze. It's him? The man who sat diagonally in front of her just now? This was a man who was as gentle as jade. He had handsome facial features, a deep outline, and a pair of eyes that had a faint smile. However, there was a trace of feminine beauty between his brows, but because of this extraordinary smile, it was perfectly blended. She was a little surprised by the handkerchief he handed over, but she still politely thanked him and took it. So embarrassed. She was sitting in such a quiet cafe with so many people, yet she was so down and out. She must have become a laughing stock in everyone's eyes. Can I sit down? The man did not leave but asked indifferently. Baiyu did not refuse and nodded lightly. Sit down. The man sat down in front of her. At this moment, Baiyu's phone suddenly rang. Baiyu picked up the phone and saw that it was an unknown number. Just as she picked it up, the man's fierce voice came from the other side. Jiang Baiyu, you made me lose face today. In the future, I won't let you have an easy time. I think you shouldn't go back. Your aunt said that if the blind date didn't work out tonight, she'll definitely chase you out with a broom. With that, the man angrily hung up the phone. Baiyu put down the phone with a cold expression, but looked at the man opposite her with a slightly shocked expression. She pursed her lips, feeling even more embarrassed. Your name is Baiyu? The man suddenly asked. Baiyu was a little surprised and finally looked at her seriously. She was a little surprised by the man's surprised tone. We have met before? Oh, nothing. The man slightly curled his lips and smiled. The waiter came over and served the coffee. Baiyu asked, Are you waiting for someone? The man looked out of the window. Same as you. Same? Baiyu was in disbelief. Do you know why I came to the cafe? Blind date, right? The man's handsome face showed a look of understanding. But it seems like you were forced? Baiyu's tears gradually dried up, but she was still very depressed. When she thought about going back and facing her aunt's storm, she felt a heavy stone pressing down on her heart. The man ordered another cup of coffee. Seeing her disappointed expression, he asked, Coincidentally, I'm alone too. Do you mind? It's fine, I don't mind. Baihao couldn't think of a good place to go. He couldn't go home for the time being. She just wanted to sit quietly for a while. Where are your parents? The man suddenly asked. When I was very young, they died in a car accident, Baihao said quietly. It wasn't until later that I heard from my grandmother that my mother was pregnant at that time. In fact, not only did I lose my parents, I also lost a younger brother or sister. She didn't know why, but chatting with this man made her feel relaxed. Therefore, with this topic, it was as if she was pouring out her grievances to him. She poured out all the oppression and pain that she had endured since she was young. Chapter 4580. The man listened silently like a loyal listener. Byran said sadly, I know it wasn't easy for her to raise me since I was young, but did she never have any selfish thoughts about me? My cousin couldn't study well, so she placed all her hopes on me. I also promised her that no matter what happened in the future, I would take care of her until she died. But I just graduated not long ago and my job is just the beginning. How can I have great achievements after graduating? My aunt probably finally lost her patience and is anxious to marry me off. That's fine, but she actually asked for such an outrageous condition. She was wondering why her blind date partner was getting older and had a worse attitude each time. If it wasn't for today, she really wouldn't know that she was being ruthlessly schemed against by her aunt. The man suddenly asked, "What do you think about marriage?" Byran gently rubbed the handle of the coffee. "Actually, I've never had any illusions about marriage. My future husband doesn't need to be too rich, nor does he need to have a wealthy identity. Even if he rents a house, it's fine as long as he gives me a home and doesn't let me wander around." The man was puzzled. "But didn't your aunt ask your future husband to buy her a house?" "I won't compromise on this matter." Bayu tried to restrain himself. "Since she raised me up, I won't argue with her about anything. But if she wants to use my marriage to exchange for this house, I'll definitely not do it." The man raised his eyebrows slightly, and his jade-like face suddenly raised a touch of probing. "Then, what do you think of me?" Byran looked up in confusion. The man stared at her eyes seriously and said word by word, "Let's get married. Are you willing?" Byran widened her eyes slightly and her breathing stopped slightly. Creak! The rusty iron door was pushed open and Byran's weak voice could be heard. "I'm back." Returning home from the crowded subway station during the evening rush hour, she was already exhausted. Yuqin walked out of the kitchen wearing an apron. She rubbed her hands on the apron and looked expectant. How was the blind date this time? Baihao didn't answer. Instead, he wore a lukewarm expression. "Auntie, where did you keep the household register?" "Household register?" Yuqin did not hide her surprise when she heard that Byran wanted to take the household register. Did this mean that the blind date was a success? Otherwise, what was the point of using the household register? Asking for the household registration booklet meant that they were going to get the marriage certificate. She had never expected this development. Originally, she had been scared out of her wits. However, Byran had angered her blind date and made her run away. Otherwise she would dawdle. Although she didn't reject the blind date, she didn't explicitly agree either. A long delay meant trouble. She was so surprised that she felt like she was in a dream. "Great. This is great. Is this a success?" Yuqin's greedy expression appeared on her face. Baihao nodded gently. He could see the ambition in her eyes more clearly. "All right, just you wait. I'll get it for you." Yuqin hurriedly rummaged through the drawers and took out the household register. She carefully handed it to Byran. "Are you going to get your marriage certificate now?" "The Civil Affairs Bureau is closed now." Byran said, "Let's go get the marriage certificate tomorrow." This is too sudden." Chapter 4581. At this time Yuqin started to be hypocritical. My daughter is about to get married. As her aunt, I can't bear to part with her. But I can't keep you by my side all the time. A grown girl can't be kept at home." Since this matter was settled, she had to ask about the house some other day. Yuqin asked indirectly, "Since you've decided to get married, why don't you bring him home to meet you? Do you want to meet him?" "Of course." "Then we'll have to wait until tomorrow." Byran said, "It's too late today. He has something to do." "That's true. This big boss of a renovation company must be very busy. Tomorrow I'll prepare a table of good wine and dishes. Then you can call him home and have a meal together. You're getting married, so you have to meet his parents. We've treated you like your biological parents for so many years. In the future we'll be the ones to send you off to get married." Yuqin's enthusiasm made her even more disappointed. "Okay." She answered hastily and went back to her room. The next day Byran woke up very early. When she woke up, she received a text message from that man. "Remember to wear a white shirt and put on light makeup." She did not have time to contact the man. Yesterday, the man had mentioned the marriage to her too suddenly. When the man introduced himself, she was not in the mood to listen carefully, so she did not even remember his name. If she asked again, she would feel embarrassed. The reason why she agreed to marry him on a whim was that Byran was getting more and more exhausted by the marriage that her aunt had arranged for her. She had a little interest in revenge and a little bit of anger. Moreover, she had a good impression of this man. Hence, the lightning marriage was completed in one go. As for why the man had chosen her as his marriage partner, the man frankly said that marriage in such a city was too burdensome for someone of his status. The house was easily worth more than 10 million, the car, the gift money. Actually, the marriage he wanted was very simple. A very small house, even if it was only 2 bedrooms and 2 living rooms. Every day when he came home from work, he could lean on the bed with his wife and watch TV. This was his most ordinary dream. He had also promised her that after marriage, they would live together according to her wishes. She just had to be mentally prepared. As for the matters between husband and wife, it was all up to her. Marriage was obviously such an important thing. Why did it seem so frivolous when it came to this man? What if they were not suitable for each other, what would happen if they divorced in the future? Bai Chang didn't dare to think too much. Perhaps it was because he was really stimulated that he didn't think too much about the future. Holding the household register and ID card, Bai Ran put on a white shirt, put on some light makeup and went out. The man sent a text message saying that he was almost at the entrance of the Civil Affairs Bureau. Bai Ran was afraid that the morning rush hour would delay him and make him wait too long, so he took a taxi directly to the entrance of the Civil Affairs Bureau. The man was already in the registration hall. He had asked for 2 forms in advance and was filling them out seriously. Bai Hao walked to him and stood behind him. At first glance, he saw the old man's vigorous handwriting. The name was a little messy, but it looked very nice, like a carefully designed signature. Wuxia. Chapter 4582. He was just like his name. This man gave people a feeling of gentleness, and so did his name. Have you been here for a long time? The man looked back at her and said, No, I just got here not long ago. I was afraid that you would wait for too long, so I quickly took a taxi here. There was a bit of traffic on the way. Bai Yin explained carefully and sat down opposite him. The man handed her a pen and paper and said to her, I've already filled in my name. You just have to fill in your name. Okay. Bai Kun held a pen and paper and filled his name in the female column. Then he copied some words that looked like a declaration and passed it to him. So this man's name was Gu Qingze. It was easy to remember. She remembered it immediately. Gu Qingze saw that she handed him the pen and paper and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Why are you giving it to me? Ah. You should give it to the window. Oh. Bai Yin stood up in a panic and was about to walk to the window when the man called out to her again. Wait. What's wrong? Gu Qingze stood up and walked to her side. He was 185 meters tall and his aura was almost a notch above hers. She had been sitting down yesterday, so she didn't realize that he was so tall. Because they had said goodbye at the cafe, she didn't notice his height. He had been sitting down since he entered the registration hall, so she didn't have the chance to see him. She didn't expect him to be so tall. Also, from her angle, his side profile was unbelievably exquisite. She had never seen a man with such exquisite features in the real world. The man did not notice her scrutiny. Instead, he took the application form from her hands and handed it to the window. After exchanging a few words with the staff, he turned around and said to her, Did you bring your household register and ID card? Yes. Bai Yin gave him all the documents and asked, I also brought the cost of the production. It's fine. How can I let my wife pay for this? The man said as he took out his wallet. However, the word wife made Bai Yin lower her head shyly. She didn't know where to look. Suddenly, she realized that it seemed unnecessary to keep questioning her choice on the way here. This man seemed to be a good marriage partner. All along they had been dating before getting married. After dating for so long, once they got married, it was very easy for their marriage to go wrong and fall into crisis. Then, a marriage without any understanding must be even more dangerous, right? She didn't know anything about this man. Although she had never been in a relationship before, he gave her an unprecedented sense of security. Most importantly, if she got married, it would mean that she would have her own little family in the future. She didn't know if this feeling was reliable or not. All right. The man suddenly interrupted her thoughts and said to her, Let's go take some photos. Bai Chang came back to his senses and nodded. He took back his ID card and household register and walked to a room with the man. The photographer stood behind the camera and directed the two of them to sit in front of the red background. The man deliberately wore a white shirt, which was similar to her style. The snow-white shirt made his skin clean and delicate, and his temperament was refined. Chapter 4583. Both of you should sit closer together. Smile, woman, you should smile too. Today is a big day, don't be so stiff. Be more natural. Yes. Your smile is too stiff. The man is holding the woman's shoulder. Gu Qingze raised his hand and gently put it on Bai Ran's shoulder. Bai Hao tried hard to ease his tense mood. Finally, he showed a natural smile. Okay, that's it. Hold it for 3 seconds, 3, 2, 1. Snap. The cameraman took a few photos and put down the camera. He walked over and congratulated Gu Qingze and Bai Ran. Congratulations to the two newlyweds. After the photo shoot, Bai Ran and Gu Qingze walked out of the room and sat on a long bench, waiting for the certificate to be completed. There was a long silence between the two of them. Gu Qingze, on the other hand, was silently looking out the window. She didn't know if he was from the military, but his posture was as straight as a pine tree. Bai Ran hesitated and finally said, "Do you have time tonight?" Gu Qingze turned to look at her. "What's wrong?" "My aunt said that she wants to meet you." Bai Ran quickly explained, "After all, they raised me since I was young, so I'm considered half a newlyweds. Now that we're married, she said that she wants to invite you for dinner." Before Gu Qingze could say anything, she said guiltily, "If you really don't have time, then forget it." "I haven't said anything." The man frowned slightly and said, "Do you want to have dinner together?" "Yes." "Okay." The man agreed without hesitation. Bai Ran finally sighed in relief. Gu Qingze, Jiang Bai Ran. Their names were called from the window. Gu Qingze stood up and Bai Ran hurriedly got up as well. They followed him to the window, and the staff handed them two brand-new marriage certificates. Congratulations to the two newlyweds. A handsome man and a beautiful woman, what a match. Gu Qingze took the marriage certificate and handed the other one to her. When Bai Ran received the marriage certificate, she felt like she was floating. It felt so surreal. When she flipped to the next page, her name, date of birth, age, and the photo of the two of them sitting in front of a red background, she was really married. She had married a man she had known for less than a day. No wedding, no garland, no diamond ring, she had married herself off so carelessly. For a moment, Bai Kun didn't know if his choice was right or wrong. Gu Qingze looked at her stunned face and still felt that it was a pity. It was too rushed and I didn't have time to prepare a diamond ring. However, it won't be too late to prepare for the wedding. Wedding? Bai Hao looked up in surprise. Our wedding? What is it? Gu Qingze raised his eyebrows. Don't you want to hold a wedding? How could he not want to hold one? Like every girl, a wedding was the most important ceremony in her life. He was looking forward to this ceremony, but at the same time he was filled with fantasy. He wondered what her wedding ceremony would be like. Bai Yu chuckled. There's no rush for the wedding. Most importantly, they would first get to know each other and cultivate feelings for each other. The wedding would be a matter of course. Chapter 4584. At noon, Gu Qingze and Bai Ran went to a restaurant for lunch. It was a simple Chinese meal, but the restaurant Gu Qingze chose was in the most inconspicuous corner of the street. It was not far from the marriage registration office, but the food was delicious. Gu Qingze parked his car in the underground parking lot. He drove a Volkswagen. She had seen many Volkswagens, but it was the first time she saw this model. The letters Phaeton were printed on the back. In this city, people who drove Volkswagens were salaried workers and the rich. This man seemed to come from an ordinary family. This car looked very ordinary, but once inside, the luxurious interior made Bai Kun a little dumbfounded. The control panel seemed to be made of mahogany. Was it modified? Where are we going? To buy gifts. Gifts? Yeah. Gu Qingze drove the car to the shopping center. To Bai Ran they were her uncle and aunt, but to Gu Qingze they were his parents-in-law. It was his first time visiting his parents-in-law, so he naturally had to bring some gifts. Gu Qingze went to the shopping center and bought a pearl necklace for Yi Yuqin. Bai Ran said that Yi Yuqin liked pearl necklaces the most, and her uncle Jianghu liked jade pipes. The old man next door had a jade pipe every day, and Jianghu was always envious. Other than the gifts for their first meeting, Gu Qingze also bought cigarettes, alcohol, donkey hide gelatin, and some women's skincare products. In total it cost nearly 10,000 yuan. Bai Ran was a little embarrassed. It was her first time eating with Gu Qingze, and she was already spending so much money. When it was time to pay, Bai Ran looked at the number on the meter and felt her scalp tingle. She looked at Gu Qingze's back with guilt and said nervously, "This time? I've made you spend so much money?" Gu Qingze turned around and was stunned, but he smiled. "What do you mean by spending money? It's my first time meeting my parents-in-law, so I have to be polite." Bai Ran was secretly touched by his thoughtfulness and courtesy. She wondered if her aunt would be satisfied with him when he returned home. Would she let her go? Marrying this man seemed to be the most rebellious thing she had ever done in her life. Due to the fact that her aunt had brought her up, no matter how harsh her aunt was to her, she was used to accepting it. She thought that as long as she married this man, then, in the future, she could finally get away from the endless blind dates. She admitted that when she was with him, he was like a safe haven. When he got home, Gu Qingze parked the car in front of the neighborhood. When he got out of the car, he looked at the shabby neighborhood that was obviously built in the last century and was slightly surprised. Did she live in this place? My house is in this building. Byran pointed at a building in front of him shyly and said, but there's no elevator. We have to climb the stairs. I'm fine. Gu Qingze picked up the gift and said to her, let's go upstairs. He followed behind her and walked up the stairs. However, in the narrow corridor, other than being crowded, the corners were filled with cobwebs, and the originally white walls were covered in dust. The escalator was covered in dust, and the air seemed to be a little turbid. On the first floor there were 5 households. The smoke was all directed towards the corridor. When it was mealtime, everyone was cooking and all kinds of smoke and fumes filled the air. Chapter 45-85. We're here. She walked to the door. Through the door, Byran could hear the sound of cooking in the kitchen. Byran took out her keys to open the door. Hearing the sound of the door opening, Yi Yuqin walked out of the kitchen. When she saw Byran, she quickly asked, where is he? Byran turned around. At that moment, Gu Qingze stepped through the door. He was so tall that he had to lower his head slightly to enter the door. It felt like he would hit the door frame. His tall height made the whole house seem even shorter. However, when Yi Yuqin saw his incomparably handsome face, her entire body froze. The man in front of her was a little too young. Also, he seemed different from the person in the photo. The owner of the renovation company in the photo was bald and old. What about the man in front of her? He was even better looking than the male celebrities on TV. More importantly, he had an inexplicable aristocratic aura. However, Yi Yuqin quickly pulled Byran aside and asked suspiciously, who is this person? His name is Gu Qingze. We just registered our marriage today. As she spoke, Byran took out the household registration booklet from her bag and returned it to her. Yi Yuqin immediately knocked the booklet in her hand to the ground. Gu Qingze? That's not the name of the man I introduced to you on a blind date. Byran explained, that man didn't like me, so, how is that possible? Yi Yuqin didn't believe it. He saw your photo and was very satisfied with you. He couldn't stop praising you. How could he not be satisfied with you? I think you're the one who's not satisfied with him. Auntie, that man is so old. It's fine if you set me up on a blind date, but why do you always find me this kind of man? Byran also vented her dissatisfaction. Yi Yuqin was furious when she heard that. Gu Qingze walked over and handed the gift to Yi Yuqin. Hello, Auntie. I'm Gu Qingze. Nice to meet you. Yi Yuqin looked at him, but she was so angry that she couldn't say anything. She ignored Gu Qingze and pulled Byran into her room. After closing the door, she pushed Byran to the wall and asked fiercely, so, you said you want to get married with the household registration booklet. You want to marry this man? Yeah. So. Yi Yuqin panicked. Have you registered your marriage? Yes. Baiyu took a deep breath and puffed out her chest. He's my husband now. Pa. What she received was Yi Yuqin's exasperated slap. Do you know how much money I've spent on this blind date? I gave them a golden bracelet before they were willing to introduce it to me. Who was Emotsong? He was the big boss of Dingxing Renovation Company, and his net worth was close to 100 million. So what if he's old? The most important thing for a man was not his good looks. Could good-looking people make a living? Can it feed you? Bai Kun finally couldn't take it anymore. Why should I rely on a man to support me? Can't I feed myself? You even know how to talk back. Yi Yuqin was about to be slapped again. This time Byran didn't give in. Instead, he forcefully grabbed her wrist. Chapter 45-86. Byran's words were like pearls. So you raised me just to eat my flesh. These words obviously provoked Yi Yuqin. What do you mean by eating your flesh? Why do you make it sound so bad? Yi Yuqin said exasperatedly, you also know that I raised you and this is how you repay me? You also admit that you're forcing me to repay you? Byran was so angry that she was about to cry. Do you know that when I heard that man say that you sold me for a house, I was really disappointed. What do you mean I sold you for a house? How did I sell you? I sent you to a rich family to live a good life. Is that my fault? Then why didn't you bless me and him? The him that Byran was referring to was Gu Qingze. I'm also very happy with him. Yi Yuqin's face was ferocious. What can he give you? Byran gritted her teeth and said, what he can give me is not important. I think the most important thing is whether he can give you anything. Yi Yuqin was speechless. Originally, after you registered your marriage with him, he said that he wanted to visit you. In the end, you didn't like him from the moment he entered the house. You're married, right? You have a man to support you, right? You're all grown up now. You dare to talk to me like this? If you're so capable, get out of here and don't come back. Yi Yuqin pointed at the door in a threatening tone. Bai Ran looked at her deeply and suddenly sneered. Fine. I'll leave. She had heard this countless times. Finally, this time she was disheartened. Yi Yuqin did not expect that the soft and cowardly Bai Ran would know how to resist her. She turned around, opened the door and walked to Gu Qingze. Gu Qingze's expression did not look good, because he heard the argument between Bai Ran and Yi Yuqin. Seeing Bai Ran walk out, he walked over worriedly and blurted out, Ran? Bai Ran looked at him in surprise. Gu Qingze immediately asked, Are you okay? Bai Ran ignored the surprise in her heart and shook her head. I'm fine. She bent down and picked up the gifts that Gu Qingze had bought for her uncle and aunt. She said to him, Let's go. Gu Qingze understood what she meant. He reached out to hold her hand and walked towards the door. Yi Yuqin was so angry that she couldn't swallow her pride. She walked to the door, looked at their backs and said fiercely, If you want to chase them away, don't come back if you have the guts. Bai Yin walked away without looking back. Yi Yuqin was almost angered to death by her decisiveness, but she couldn't bring herself to ask her to stay, so she could only stare helplessly. The car shuttled through the traffic in the city center. Bai Hao sat in the car, silently looking at the street outside the window. Gu Qingze circled the park again and again. Suddenly he asked, Where are we going? Let's find a hotel. Hotel? Gu Qingze didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Why are we going to a hotel? With him around, why did she have to go to the hotel? Bai Ran explained, With my aunt's condition, she won't be able to return home for a while. Idiot. The car suddenly stopped at a crossroad. Gu Qingze turned around and looked at her seriously. Now we're already married. Whether it's from a legal or other perspective, your home is where I am. That place is no longer your home. Chapter 4587. Gu Qingze reached out and caressed her cheeks. Good girl, come home with me. She blushed and lowered her head. She ran her fingers through her hair. But I look so pathetic. Also, I haven't officially met your parents. My parents don't live with me. Gu Qingze said, I live alone. You live alone? Yes. But, I'm not mentally prepared yet. Although they were married, living with a man, it seemed too unexpected. She was not mentally prepared at all. Gu Qingze smiled knowingly. Don't worry, there are 2 bedrooms. You can sleep wherever you want. By the way, if you're free tomorrow, you can bring your luggage over. Gu Qingze paused and asked, Do you have any other luggage? Actually, I don't have any luggage. Bai Yan smiled bitterly. After what I did tonight, with my aunt's personality, she will definitely cut my clothes into pieces. She had left in a hurry just now. She should have taken the opportunity to pack her clothes and take them away. Other than clothes and a bunch of skincare products, she did not seem to have anything particularly valuable. Gu Qingze heard and smiled. If it's clothes, you can buy new ones. Then tomorrow when we get home later, take a shower first and tell me your measurements. The mall is downstairs. Only then did Bai Yu nod. She did not seem to know much about this man. In her impression, he should be a high-class white-collar worker who lived in an ordinary neighborhood. However, looking at his temperament, it did not seem so. Bai Yan and Gu Qingze walked to the entrance of an apartment. The apartment was above the shopping mall. It was a commercial and residential apartment. After entering the apartment, Gu Qingze went to the bathroom to prepare hot water. Bai Yan took the opportunity to look around the room. The apartment was not big. It had 2 bedrooms, 2 living rooms and a small study. Gu Qingze walked out of the bathroom and saw that she was looking at him curiously. He explained, I lived in this apartment when I was in university. Did you buy this? I rented it. Rented? Yes. To be precise, the entire shopping mall and office building belonged to the Gu family. However, ever since he was an adult, Gu Jinglian had asked him for rent every month. Gu Qingze had to pay him the market price. Gu Qingze's lips curled into a smile. However, I pay the rent every 5 years. The next due date is the year after next. According to his estimation, the size of this apartment should be about 90 square meters, and the rent should be at least 100,000 yuan a year. That would be 500,000 yuan in 5 years. To her, it was already very impressive. The average white-collar worker could not earn so much money. What do you do for a living? Bai Chang asked tentatively. Me? Gu Qingze was the external CEO of the financial management under the Gu Corporation, which meant that he was paid according to an annual salary. Gu Jinglian hired Gu Qingze with an annual salary in order to hone his skills and train him. He also wanted the board of directors to consider whether Gu Qingze was qualified to inherit the Gu Corporation. Under normal circumstances, Gu Jinglian's salary was a combination of annual salary and dividends. The annual salary was about 3 million yuan. If the results were good, then the dividends would be very considerable. Chapter 4588. Tell me your measurements. I'll go buy some clothes. Oh, it's best if you tell me all your measurements in detail. Baiyu blushed and said, shall I write them down? Okay. There was a pen and paper on the table. Baiyu blushed and wrote down her measurements on the paper. She folded the paper until it was the size of a tofu block before handing it to him. Gu Qingze smiled when he saw her put the folded tofu block in her hand. Don't worry, I won't peek. Baiyu blushed even more when he said that. Gu Qingze left the room. Baiyu entered the bathroom. The water was almost full. She took off her clothes and stepped into the bathtub. The moment the warm water enveloped her, she let out a sigh of contentment. It was as if the exhaustion she had accumulated for so long had finally been released for a short while. What a crazy day. She married a strange man. Then she actually rebelled against Yi Yuqin and left her home that was like a demon's den. Finally she came to his house. It was too crazy. Baiyu shyly buried her face in the water and blew bubbles silently. She didn't know how long he had been gone. As she soaked, the water in the bathtub gradually turned cold. Only then did she start scrubbing. When she was done washing and drying herself, she realized that he wasn't back yet. This meant that she didn't have any clothes to change into. There was a bathrobe hanging on the wall of the bathroom. However, there was only one set. Because she came back too suddenly, he probably didn't prepare an extra bathrobe. He hadn't bought the clothes yet, so it shouldn't be a problem for her to borrow his for a while, right? With that thought, Baiyu silently reached out and took the bathrobe down. It was so wide and big that it was effortless for her to put it on. After putting on her clothes, she had no choice but to open the door with her dirty clothes. She walked to the balcony but couldn't find the washing machine. The balcony had floor-to-ceiling windows. There was only one chair and a small table that seemed to be used for drinking coffee and admiring the night view. She looked around the house but still couldn't find the washing machine. Just as she was feeling extremely uneasy, the door suddenly opened. She looked in the direction of the sound and saw Gu Qingze coming back with bags of various sizes. She subconsciously pulled her clothes together. The bathrobe had covered her body well enough, but she was still worried about being exposed. It was almost an instinctive action. Gu Qingze was surprised to see her carrying a pile of dirty clothes. Can't you find the washing machine? In the bathroom. I only see a row of cabinets in the bathroom. I don't see a washing machine. Gu Qingze smiled and walked into the bathroom. He touched the row of cabinets and pressed them lightly. This cabinet was made to be an invisible cabinet. With a press of a button, it would open and there was a washing machine embedded inside. Baiyu saw that he actually hid the washing machine in such a deep place. No wonder she couldn't find it when she searched the entire house. I'm sorry I didn't tell you earlier. I'm fine. Just as she was about to walk over, she suddenly thought of something. There doesn't seem to be a drying rack on your balcony. Why do you need a drying rack? I'm hanging the clothes. Baiyu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Otherwise, how do you dry your clothes? The clothes will dry as soon as they are taken out of the washing machine. Is that so? It sounded like it was quite advanced. Chapter 4589. Gu Qingze said, I don't like to dry clothes on the balcony. When I bought the electrical appliances, they said that this washing machine has a disinfectant belt to dry it. You just have to fold it and put it in the closet. While he was talking, Bairan was silently studying how the washing machine worked. So far, Yi Yuqin had been using an old-fashioned washing machine with 2 barrels. This washing machine was a little old. According to Yi Yuqin's personality, these electrical appliances were basically not replaced unless they were broken. There was no other reason why the washing machine was especially durable. The electrical appliances at home had not been replaced for a long time. Therefore, Bairan had only seen this washing machine before, but she did not know how to use it. Gu Qingze saw her uneasiness and guessed that she did not know how to use it. So he thoughtfully turned on the washing machine, took the clothes from Bairan and put them in. Thank you. I bought you a lot of clothes including pajamas. Do you want to try them? Bairan nodded. She carried the bags into the room and saw that the tags had been removed. The packaging was also the same as the shopping malls, so she could not tell what brand it was. However, just by touching the texture of the material, she could clearly feel that the material was very good. It was very comfortable and light. This price should not be cheap. She had always been wearing clothes that were very flattering. There were many street shops near the market where she used to live. The The clothes sold were at least 10 yuan and at most 100 yuan. It was very affordable. The clothes that Yi Yuqin bought for her were all bought from here. Yi Yuqin was very particular. The clothes she bought for herself were more than 200 yuan, but the clothes she bought for her were at most 100 yuan. Actually, Bai Ran understood. After all, the Jiang family was not rich. It was good enough that she did not wear other people's leftovers. She felt that Yi Yuqin had adopted her out of love and responsibility. However, slowly the responsibility became heavier. After all, it was not as simple as having an extra pair of chopsticks to feed another family. One had to know that besides studying, food and clothing, one more person would also be a big burden for a family. After Bai Ran started working, the situation improved. Yi Yuqin no longer gave her money. She even scrimped and saved to subsidize the family. Even so, Yi Yuqin was always in high spirits to go on blind dates for her. Forget it. Don't think about these things anymore. Bai Hao didn't want to recall these things. He picked up a random piece of clothing and looked at it. He was a little surprised. She originally thought that this man probably had a straight man's aesthetic, and the clothes he bought wouldn't be very nice. At most, they would be decent. However, the clothes he bought were all quite nice. She was holding an A-line dress in her hand. Slowly, she looked like a young lady. Bai Kun could not bear to part with it. It seemed that this was the most decent dress she had ever worn since she was a child. However, he must have spent a lot of money to buy so many clothes for her. Bai Chang felt guilty when he thought about it. The clothes he bought were enough to last her for a season. Bai Ran changed into the clothes. Outside the door, Gu Qingze asked softly, "Do the clothes fit?" "Yes." "Come out and show me." "All right." Chapter 4590. It was a look of amazement and admiration. Gu Qingze looked her up and down and raised his eyebrows. Very beautiful. He had brought her size to buy clothes. Because he had not tried them on, he could not help but worry that the clothes he bought would not fit well, would be uncomfortable or would not look good. "How's the fit?" "It's very tight and light. It's quite comfortable." Bai Yan carefully probed, "Is this expensive?" "It's not expensive. It was only a few thousand yuan each." However, Gu Qingze did not say anything. He knew that with Bai Yan's personality she would probably feel bad about it. Therefore, after buying all the clothes, he specially ordered the manager to remove the tags and change the packaging so that she could not see the brand or the price. This way she would at least feel at ease wearing it. Moreover, a few thousand yuan each was not expensive at all to Gu Qingze. Bai Yan thought that the not expensive he said was at most a few hundred yuan each. She could not help but exclaim, "A few hundred yuan can buy clothes with such good fabric. It's really affordable." Gu Qingze almost couldn't hold back his laughter. Fortunately, he did not take her to the counter this time. Otherwise, she would definitely not be willing to wear the clothes he bought for her when she saw the price tag. Bai Yan saw that his eyes were full of praise and smiled shyly. "Really? Yes, I don't lie. This dress looks really good on you." "This dress is pretty good to begin with." Gu Qingze heard this and smiled. He walked over and helped her straighten her clothes. Bai Yan only felt that once he got close, the fragrance of orchids on his body could no longer be resisted. She lowered her head slightly, not daring to let him see the blush on her face. Ever since she was young, she had never stood so intimately with anyone before. Gu Qingze helped her straighten her clothes and said, "Beautiful clothes have to be worn by the right person to show their beauty and value." The praise in his words was self-evident. Bai Yan was really a very good-looking girl. Her facial features were very gentle and delicate. There were many types of beauty. Some of them were sharp, provocative, and aggressive. Some of them were as calm as water, dull and tasteless. At first sight, one would find them breathtaking, but after looking at them for a long time, one would get bored. But Bai Ran's facial features belonged to the category that one could never get tired of looking at 100 times. Perhaps the first time he saw her, she definitely couldn't be considered a heavenly beauty. However, the more he looked at her, especially when he stared at her, the more he found her breathtaking. However, due to the environment in which she grew up, Yi Yuqin had always belittled her more than praised her, which had caused her to develop an inferiority complex. She always felt that she couldn't compare to others in any way. Gu Qingze's words seemed to hold her in his heart. "I also bought other designs. Try them on one by one, okay?" Bai Hao turned around. He suddenly recalled something and halted. "You? Why are you so nice to me?" When Gu Qingze heard this, he was stunned for a long while before he broke into laughter. He had only bought her a few pieces of clothing. At most, he spoke a little more gently, but it made her feel flattered. What kind of life had she lived in the past 10 years? She was so scared to accept his kindness to her. Gu Qingze asked disapprovingly, Shouldn't I be nice to my wife? Chapter 4591. Bai Ran returned to her room and tried on the clothes that Gu Qingze bought for her one by one. Other than the A-line dress, there were also slim-fit dresses and floral dresses. She seemed to be able to pull them off very well in different styles. Other than the fact that Bai Ran was a clothes hanger, Gu Qingze had good taste too. Her temperament was quiet and gentle, and he would choose clothes for her based on her style. These clothes were not very revealing and were not sexy. Although there were many styles, Bai Ran could always look sweet when she wore them. The more Gu Qingze looked at them, the more satisfied he was. Bai Ran counted carefully. He bought a total of 10 sets of clothes for her and they were all full sets. Are you going to work tomorrow? I'm off tomorrow. Okay, there's no rush. Dry clean these clothes first. Dry clean? Are you going anywhere tomorrow? No. Then wear your pajamas first. Be particular for the day. The pajamas were placed in the washing machine and could be washed and dried in an hour. She could wear soft pajamas the next morning. Bai Ran was touched by his thoughtfulness and nodded. It's late. Go to sleep. Okay. Bai Ran took her phone charger and phone and returned to her room. Just as she laid down on the bed, Bai Ran opened WeChat and saw her best friend Mila sending her endless messages. You're married? You're married? You're married? Then there was a series of emojis. Bai Ran did not know whether to laugh or cry. She gave her an affirmative reply. Yes, I'm married. In the morning, when they went to register their marriage, Bai Ran's mind was empty while waiting for the certificate. She sent a message to her best friend Milu. I'm married. After that, there was no time to reply to her. Too many things had happened today. Lying in bed, she felt exhausted. She opened WeChat and was amused by the series of funny emojis sent by Milu. Oh my God. I can't believe it. I haven't seen you for a few days. What happened? You don't even have a boyfriend. You abandoned me. Goodbye. Our friendship is over. Mila kept complaining like a machine gun, venting her dissatisfaction. The two of them had a very good relationship. Ever since they were in university, there had been a misunderstanding. No discord, no concord. Since then, their relationship had been very good. After moving to the same dormitory, they were inseparable like sisters. Although in today's society one had to guard against fire, theft, and girlfriends seemed to have gradually become a dangerous person. However, Milu and Bai Kun were 100% trustworthy in each other's eyes. Mil was a solid friend. Ever since she was young, Bai Yan had always been a very insecure person. Milu had always protected her like a boyfriend. She usually had a neat short haircut, giving people a very neutral style. Milu, tell me, who was it? When I wasn't paying attention, he kidnapped my best girlfriend. Bai Yu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He called her. As soon as the call connected, Mila started wailing. Why did you abandon me to marry a man? Didn't you agree to spend the rest of your life alone? But you secretly got married. Milu, you know about my aunt, right? Milu was silent for a while and regained his serious tone. Yes, I know. She forced you to go on a blind date again? Then, her tone immediately became nervous. Could it be that you married an old man who went on blind dates? Chapter 4592. Bai Yan pondered for a while and finally told her the truth. I married this man in a fit of pique. There was the sound of someone vomiting blood on the other end, followed by Mi Li's angry roar. Don't tell me you married someone in a fit of pique with your aunt. Do you know how hateful my aunt is? What are the conditions she set for the blind date? No matter who it is, whether bald or old, as long as he can give her a house for my cousin to marry a wife, she will agree to marry me to someone else. Milu was so angry that his lungs were about to explode. Isn't this human trafficking in disguise? Yes. Bai Yan felt wronged. So, I found someone to marry. At least, I won't have to face those weird blind dates anymore. Bai Yan felt like vomiting at the mention of blind dates. Milu was dumbfounded. Is this the main point? The main point is the man you married reliable? Anyway, I think he's quite good. He knows how to respect girls and he's also very gentlemanly. Most importantly, Bai Yan recalled Gu Qingze's handsome side profile when he was sitting in the front passenger seat. Her face was burning. Most importantly, he's also very handsome. Don't be fooled by appearances. Handsome men are generally fickle. Mila paused and launched a series of attacks. What's his personality like? How's his family background? What about your parents? Did they agree to your marriage? Do you have a house? Do you have a car? Are the elders easy to get along with? Bai Hao was dumbfounded by the series of questions that came out like a cannon. She looked at the ceiling blankly and then replied in a daze, I didn't even ask. There was the sound of someone vomiting blood again. Mi Li's hoarse voice came through the receiver. Bayan, can you not be so decadent? No. Mi Li declared strongly. As your best friend, I want to meet him. Meet? Yes. At least I can rest assured if I approve it. But I'm already married. You can still get a divorce after you get married. It's just a marriage certificate. It won't bind you forever. Take advantage of the fact that both of you have just gotten married and don't have any children yet. Cut the Gordian knot. Mi Li asked again, you fell out with your aunt, where are you staying now? If you don't have anywhere to go, then come to my place. I'll take care of you. I'm staying at his house. What? An hour later, Mi Li rushed to the door of the apartment aggressively and pressed the bell. Just as Byran opened the door, she saw that Gu Qingze had already walked out of the study. When he reached the door and opened it, Mi Li walked in with his phone in hand. When he saw the man, he was stunned. Oh my God! She covered her face and her eyes widened. Gu Qingze's face was full of confusion. He had no idea what was going on. Frowning, he asked, Who are you looking for? Mi Li's aggressive stance instantly softened. He cleared his throat and lowered his head, not even daring to look at Gu Qingze directly. I'm looking for Byran. Is she here? Mi Li. Chapter 4593. Byran. Mi Li entered the door awkwardly and winked at her as she walked over. You? Gu Qingze turned around and looked at Mi Li, who was covering his face and did not dare to look at him directly. He was slightly suspicious. Your friend? Yeah. Then have a seat. Although Gu Qingze was a little surprised that she had barged into their house so late at night, he still treated her as a guest. Byran held her hand and smiled guiltily at Gu Qingze. She's looking for me for something urgent. Let's go into the room to talk. With that, the two of them pushed each other into the room. Gu Qingze stood there in a daze until the two of them entered the room. Then he shook his head helplessly. In the room, Mi Li shook Byran's shoulder desperately. Your husband is so handsome, How can he be so handsome, Gu Qingze's appearance belonged to the standard idol drama style. He had fair skin, sword-like eyebrows, peach blossom eyes, and a clean temperament. On the other hand, he had the calm temperament of an old cadre. This type of man was simply an existence that killed women instantly. If your husband debuts, I'll definitely be his fan. Just a second ago, Mi Li was still questioning her on the phone. Now, she seemed to have become Gu Qingze's diehard fan. Gosh, Byran, how did you find such a perfect husband? Mi Li was in disbelief. Then she suddenly calmed down and thought of something. She leaned over and asked, Did he say anything tonight? What did he say? Aya, it's the problem of sleeping together. You have a room to yourself? Yeah. He said that before getting my permission he won't force me to do anything. Tisk. So pure and simple? Could it be that he has a hidden illness in that area? Byran raised her eyebrows in confusion. Hidden illness? Aya, it's that kind, Mi Li whispered in her ear. It's just that he can't do that and can't find a woman willing to marry him. Byran quickly covered her mouth and said, Don't spout nonsense. This kind of thing is quite hurtful. Otherwise, there is another possibility. Mi Li asked suspiciously, Could it be that his marriage to you is a marriage in name? A marriage of formality was a marriage that was only formality and had no substance. On the surface, it was a normal family consisting of a man and a woman, but in reality the husband and wife were physically and mentally independent. Nowadays, many of the marriages of convenience were formed by people who had sex with each other. Both husband and wife maintained an unknown sexual orientation, and such an orientation could not be known by the family. After all, the general public held prejudice and malice against homosexual relationships. Some elders didn't have extreme views on homosexuality, but once it fell on their children they couldn't accept it. Therefore, in order to appease the elders, the children adopted a formal marriage. A man who liked men and a woman who liked women rarely had the chance to successfully form a family. Therefore, at this time, gay men would casually find a passable woman to marry through blind dates. This kind of woman was also known as a co-wife. Most of the same wives didn't know that their husbands didn't like women, so they ended up as victims of marriage. Mi Li had to explain everything to her. Chapter 4594. That's impossible, right? Byran could not believe it. Gu Qingze looked very normal to her. She felt that marrying her did not seem like he was using her. Mi Li asked carefully, Then, why did he marry you? After Mi Li's question, Bairan realized that marrying him was too rushed. She was completely clueless about everything about him. She could not even figure out his motive for marrying her. Love at first sight? Hearing that, Mila could not help but mock her. Bairan, wake up. With his good qualities, girls who are prettier than you will definitely throw themselves at him. Bairan felt wronged. What does love at first sight have to do with being pretty? The prerequisite for love at first sight is that the first person you look at is definitely someone with good looks. Even if we don't talk about family background, in most cases, looks are also one of the criteria for matching social status. It doesn't have to be too good looking, but if it's too ugly, how can he fall in love at first sight? She made a lot of sense. Bairan could not refute her. She lowered her head in defeat. Seeing that, Milu sighed helplessly. Did you get married on a whim? Did you go and register your marriage with him? Bairan nodded silently. You're too muddle-headed. Marriage is a lifelong event. How can you be so casual? Mila sat down beside her and chattered on. This society is actually very unfriendly to women. Moreover, you're a divorced female celebrity. You got married in such a hurry. If you two can't get along, would you divorce so hastily? We can slowly cultivate our feelings. Slowly cultivate? Mila facepalmed. Some feelings can't be cultivated at all. Their personalities are incompatible from the beginning. No matter how you try to break in, it will be torture. She did not mean to pour cold water on Bairan. However, under such circumstances, Milu had to consider the development of things from the worst perspective so that he would not be caught off guard. You didn't even discuss this with me. I'm so angry, Bairan said angrily. I was wondering why my aunt kept arranging blind dates for me. I didn't think that she was using me. I can't take it anymore. I want to be free from this sea of bitterness. So, you randomly picked a man to marry? Milu raised his eyebrows. I think he's pretty good. Although he's not rich and can't be compared to those rich merchants, he respects me and treats me like a gentleman. That's enough. Milu was helpless. Baiyu had always been disliked by her aunt's family, so she had an inferiority complex. However, just based on his looks alone, Gu Qingze was indeed irresistible to women. Actually, marrying him isn't necessarily a bad thing. I'm just thinking about the worst. Perhaps you two have also found true love through a freak combination of circumstances. When Baiyu heard this, his eyes went blank. Is there really true love in this world? Yes. Milu vowed solemnly, true love is like wind and rain. What should come will still come. Ah. Baiyu was amused by her serious expression. Milu, thank you for rushing over. She must be worried, right? Milu also smiled and hugged her. Who asked my Baiyu to be so beautiful? I have to be on guard at all times in case she gets kidnapped. The two of them tickled each other and fell on the bed laughing. Chapter 45-95. That night, Bairan slept soundly. In her sleep, she vaguely heard a little boy calling her name. Ran. In the dream, she vaguely saw a car. She was sitting in the back seat. Turning around, a thin figure gradually disappeared into the distance. The shouts of Ran were also left behind by the car. Bairan opened her eyes abruptly and sat up in bed. She realized that the sky was already bright. She had already forgotten what she had dreamed of, but the sound of Ran still lingered in her ears. She really couldn't remember her childhood memories clearly. She even almost forgot what her parents looked like. Time was the most powerful amnesia drug. It seemed to be able to dilute everything. She vaguely remembered that there was a boy who always liked to call her Ran. However, she couldn't even remember what his name was or his surname. Perhaps, after her parents passed away in kindergarten, she spent a long time healing herself. In the end, she realized that in order to walk out of that dark memory, she had to forget it completely. As if hypnotizing herself, Bairan forced herself to forget all the memories of that period. Later on, she wanted to recall what her parents looked like, but she couldn't remember. She deliberately tried to recall and tried her best to recall, but she didn't feel much. She didn't have the courage to look at the photos again. Although the old friend had passed away, the living were still alive. But the one who lived seemed to be the one in the most pain. Because of the shock of her parents' death, her grandmother was always in a daze. She had some mental problems and was a little irritable. She didn't seem to like her that much. Her grandmother actually had some patriarchal thoughts. Without her father, she had lost her mental support. After that, her grandfather and grandmother both passed away, and Bairan had to wander around for a long time. Now that she suddenly had a home, she felt so happy that she didn't know what to do. It wasn't that her expectations were too low, but that she couldn't imagine what her own happiness would be like. Bai Ran wrapped herself in a bathrobe and went out. She found a set of home clothes folded neatly on the sofa. The sound of frying eggs came from the kitchen. Bai Ran changed into home clothes and approached the kitchen. She saw Gu Qingze holding a frying pan and spreading the eggs evenly. "Ah, you know how to cook?" Hearing this, Gu Qingze turned around. Seeing that she was already awake, he smiled and said, "Morning." "Morning." Bai Ran walked into the kitchen and looked at the eggs in his pan. They were tender and white and looked very appetizing. Frying eggs was very simple, but to make them taste good was also a test of one's ability. "This is the first time I've seen a man in an apron." Gu Qingze was wearing a white casual t-shirt, slender trousers and an apron, but he did not look out of place at all. Instead, it gave off a very gentle feeling. Gu Qingze laughed when he heard this. "Is it that rare for a man to cook? Of course it's very strange. Did your parents teach you how to cook since you were young?" "Ah," Gu Qingze frowned slightly. "My dad said that if a man can't cook, he won't be able to get a wife." Bai Kun was dumbfounded. "What happened?" "My aunt said that if a girl can't even cook, she won't be able to get married." "What about you?" Gu Qingze looked at her. "Do you know how to cook?" Chapter 4596. Gu Qingze felt sorry for her. "That's a pity." "A pity?" Bai Yu was surprised. "What's a pity?" Gu Qingze first placed the fried egg on the plate with familiarity, then turned to look into her eyes. They looked deeply into each other's eyes. "Because you won't have the chance to cook in the future." Bai Yu's heart skipped a beat. She couldn't believe it. "Do you mean that I won't have to cook after I marry you?" "Yes." "Oh my God. How could there be such a good thing in the world? Wasn't this the same as being a little rice worm with a peace of mind?" Gu Qingze said, "I've been trained to cook since I was young. If you want to cook with me, I won't be able to use my skills." Gu Qingze recalled those tough times and held his forehead silently. When he was young, Gu Qingze was the type who developed later. His IQ developed. No matter what Gu Jinglian taught him, he always acted like he didn't know anything. He really didn't know anything. Gu Jinglian and Chu Ho were anxious. They really thought that Gu Qingze was the type of boy who didn't have the talent, grades or skills. Therefore, Gu Jinglian was afraid that Gu Qingze wouldn't be able to find a wife in the future, so he developed him into a homebody. In the end, when the two of them were worried about Gu Qingze's IQ, Gu Qingze's grades skyrocketed and he got into a key city high school. When he received the report card, Chu Ho was dumbfounded and thought that Gu Qingze had learned to cheat. Aside from his studies, Gu Qingze was a late bloomer. In terms of personality, ever since he entered junior high school, Gu Qingze seemed to have become rebellious overnight. He became rebellious and didn't like to talk to Gu Jinglian. He started to be cold. Just as Gu Jinglian was thinking about how to deal with his son's rebellious behavior, Gu Qingze became mature and steady overnight. In the end, Gu Jinglian came to a conclusion. If the child was stupid, then let him play. If the child was rebellious, then let him be rebellious as long as he didn't violate his bottom line and principles. This set of educational principles was very useful when he educated Gu Xinghan. However, it wasn't that bad. At the very least, under Uncle Fu's strict conditions, Gu Qingze's culinary skills were definitely outstanding. Gu Qingze served breakfast on the table and made a cup of milk coffee. He had a sweet taste since he was young. When he drank coffee in the morning, he would add a lot of cream and sugar. Coffee was used to refresh him, but it was too bitter for him to get used to it. Bai Hao sat in front of the table, looking at the exquisite breakfast in front of him. He didn't want to destroy it with his knife and fork. A sandwich, a simple dish, a glass of milk, some porridge and some side dishes. This was in line with the nutritional requirements for breakfast. Moreover, it looked appetizing. Gu Qingze asked, "What do you want to eat tonight?" "What can you do?" "I can do anything." "You're lying." Bai Chang did not believe him. There were so many delicacies in the world. How could he know everything? "Of course I'm lying to you. How can I be omnipotent?" Gu Qingze smiled deeply. "But even if I don't know how, I can learn how to eat it if you want." Bai Ran sucked on the spoon and suddenly thought of something. "I like tomato and egg drop soup." Gu Qingze, so simple? He could make this soup with his eyes closed. Your requirements are so low? Chapter 4597. She was satisfied with tomato and egg drop soup? What a glutton. Gu Qingze said to her, "Tonight I'll make tomato and egg drop soup, then stir-fry some water spinach, braised chicken wings and sweet and sour pork ribs, okay?" "Yeah, okay." Bai Ran silently took a bite of the poached egg. She was so happy that it almost overflowed. Was this the feeling of home? It had been a long time since she felt this warm. She remembered that the happiest period of her life was probably when she was studying. At that time it was a boarding school system and she was in school every week. She didn't like to go home because her aunt would scold her when she got home. When she was in university, she rarely asked her aunt for money. Other than tuition fees, she did her best to earn money for her living expenses. She even paid for part of her tuition fees. From that moment on, she understood that she was different from others. Other classmates had parents to rely on, but she didn't. She couldn't act spoiled without restraint. From then on, she forced herself to be independent as soon as possible. She was afraid of the day when she would be kicked out of the house. Because when she was young, whenever she made her aunt unhappy, she would always say, "This is my house. If you have any backbone, get out." These words were especially hurtful. The hurt was always imprinted in her heart and could not be erased. Therefore, she did not have a sense of security since she was young. Guqingzi saw that she had a lot on her mind. Initially, there was a touch of gentleness between his brows, but for some reason, the more he thought about it, the more he seemed to have something on his mind. Bai Ran came back to her senses and smiled. "Nothing. I was distracted just now." She didn't dare to tell him what was on her mind. People always said that girls should be reserved and not show off too much. Guqingzi said, "I have to go to work later. You rest well at home, okay?" "Okay. I'll leave this address on the cupboard. If you need anything, you can call me." Guqingzi suddenly thought of something and asked, "What did your aunt say?" Bai Ran was in a daze for a moment. "She already kicked me out." Guqingzi heard this and nodded. "That place wasn't your home in the first place. Why did she kick you out?" Bai Ran was stunned. "From yesterday onwards, this is your home. Don't make things too awkward with your aunt. Of course, if she knows what's good for her, she won't make things too awkward." Bai Hao suddenly thought of something and asked carefully, "Should I visit your parents?" She finally gathered her courage. She hadn't dared to ask before because she was worried that he might not have parents or come from a divorced family. Or some other unforeseen event, wouldn't it be too presumptuous? However, he didn't bring it up. After all, Guqingzi had already visited her aunt. It was etiquette to visit both parents. Etiquette was important in everything. Hearing this, Guqingzi raised his eyebrows slightly. "I was worried that you weren't mentally prepared." "Mentally prepared? You really won't regret marrying me?" Guqingzi continued, "Once you meet my parents, you may not have the chance to withdraw from this marriage anymore." There was no concept of divorce in the Gu family. They were all very traditional in their bones.